Oh, okay. All right, I would like to call to order on the February 20th, 2023 regular board meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. If everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'd like to welcome everyone for joining us in person this evening and those who are viewing remotely. The board held an executive session on February 6th regarding safety, negotiations, and legal, on February 13th and February 15th regarding personnel, and prior to this meeting regarding personal, legal, and negotiations. Board members, with the agenda before you, are there any changes? All right, I would now like to call on the board secretary for a roll call.
Dr. Anderson.
Here.
Dr. Bader.
Here.
Ms. Brandt.
Here.
Dr. Buck.
Here.
Dr. Crevecore.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Duffy.
Here.
Ms. Huff.
Here.
Mr. Leos.
Here.
Ms. Zidney. Here. Okay.
Thank you. All right, I would now like to call on Mr. Johnson to provide us with a superintendent update.
Thank you, Jackie. I would like to share some good news about expanded student opportunities for participation in sports, including for all our girls specifically. First, we have added another middle school co-ed developmental ice hockey team. Recently, they had their first practice and everything went well. They have several more practices in the near future, and we are excited for this additional experience for our middle school students. Also, later tonight, we will present our proposal to start a girls wrestling program as another of the many athletic opportunities we offer our female student athletes. Girls wrestling is one of the fastest growing sports in the state and nation, a trend spurring our decision to add a district program. Lastly, I would like to take the opportunity to thank our Education Foundation for its support of athletes, including in these sports. The Foundation's assistance helps us fulfill our goal of providing equitable, inclusive opportunities for all students, and we greatly appreciate it. Stay High invites all current 8th grade students and their families that are attending charter, private, cyber, and homeschool, and their families to attend an open house on March 14th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. This event will help introduce these students and families to the high school as we prepare to welcome them to the 9th grade next year. During the open house, we will have tours, course overviews, opportunities to register for selected courses 2023 to 2024, athletics, clubs, and activities information, question and answer time, district registration opportunities, and opportunities to connect with parent, teacher, and student organizations. We look forward to seeing families on March 14th and helping them prepare for this important transition. On another note, this month's Straight Talk session, Restorative Practices, What is it, how is it used, and why does it work, by Jean Canals will take place tomorrow, Tuesday, February 21st, at 7 p.m. at Panorama Village Administrative Center. Jean is the Director of Student Services for the State College Area School District with over 30 years of experience in education. 10 years utilizing restorative practices and 6 as a restorative practice trainer. This is an in-person presentation where participants will learn practical strategies to build strong, healthy relationships with students and our children, families, and colleagues. All members of the community are welcome to join us. And that would be it for my update.
All right, thanks so much, Curtis. Thanks so much, Curtis. I would now like to call on Miriam Rubeck to provide an update on student initiatives.
Thank you. We invite all members of the community to our Lift Every Voice cultural experience this Friday. The multicultural program includes student musical and dance performances, readings, poetry recitations, and speeches. The event will be Friday, February 24th at 6 p.m. in the State College Area High School Performing Arts Center. It's free and no tickets are required. Please enter the building through the back entrance.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to it. All right, now I have a legislative update. Just a few notes. So I do want to let everyone know that on February 7th, the current round of the education funding lawsuit in Pennsylvania came to a close when a judge from the Commonwealth Court declared that the state's education funding structure is unconstitutional. In the order, Judge Renee Cohen-Jubilier wrote in the court that the disparity among school districts with high property values and incomes and school districts with low property values and incomes is not justified by any compelling government interest, nor is it rationally related to any legitimate government objective. And as a result of these disparities, petitioners and students attending low-wealth districts are being deprived of equal protection under the law. There very well could be appeals to this decision, so we'll be waiting to hear about that. But we'll wait and see what happens. I also wanted to note that Governor Josh Shapiro will be delivering his state budget address on March 7th, which will give us the first look at his priorities for the 2023 budgeting session. And PSBA will actually be holding a workshop on the 10th, March 10th, to go over whatever education initiatives he discusses then. After a special election at the beginning of the month, the Pennsylvania House now has a Democratic majority. They're scheduled to reconvene tomorrow. Finally. And the Senate will be returning to Harrisburg on Monday, February 27th. As a last note, also on Monday, February 27th at 1 p.m. in the Rotunda, there will be a group of activists present because 90% of all Pennsylvania school boards have now passed a resolution calling on the General Assembly to enact meaningful charter reform, which is a resolution that we have passed as well. And so we're up to 90%. Yeah. All right, that is all I have for the legislative update. So we're going to move on to Center Region Council of Governments Liaison Report. Gretchen, do you have any updates from the COG?
I do not.
Okay. All right. Finally, for our last item in communication, I would now like to call on Tom Templeton. Tom is the founder and creative director of Templeton Advantage, LLC, who is managing the superintendent search. He is with us this evening to provide an update on the community feedback related to the search. Welcome, Tom.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. I know we've put a little time aside, so I'll be as comprehensively brief as I can so that you guys can have any follow-up discussion on your end. You have in front of you a condensed report. You've seen all of these notes before, but these are kind of condensed now down into topic areas. I do want to start by thanking Linda Pierce, Lynn Tressler, and Shay McGowan for helping on some of the logistics to make sure that the meetings were put together timely. I know you were very patient with me, which I appreciate. Okay, as you move to page 2, you will see. Okay, good, thank you. As you move to page 2, you'll just see the table of contents, which I will be touching upon as we move through this. I will be focusing on the first few pages and then really doing more of an overview of the last 10 pages or so. You'll see on page 3 an introduction, kind of lays out why we did the focus groups and the passionate diversity of opinions in this community. This was people who came with good faith efforts to give very full-throated comments about the district and done in very good faith. I do want to spend a little time, however, focusing specifically in on the students and what the students had to say about the State College Area School District. Many of the strengths and concerns, please understand that if it's a concern, it doesn't necessarily mean nothing's being done. It just may mean it's a work in progress. A strength also is sometimes seen as a work in progress if it wants to become a permanent part of the culture. So these are just statements made from people from their perch as they see it. Page 4 is leveraging the stakeholder input to become best in class. This is information that you can take a look at your leisure. This information is vulnerable to being ignored unless it consistently stays in front of the board, the leadership team, and others and talked about with consistency. So, and that part of my responsibility to you is to keep this information in front of you. Okay, so if you move to page 5, a message from the students of SCASD. Direct quote from some of the students: the next superintendent should bring a group of students together and serve as your leaders and your ambassadors that can connect with all students in the district. We got this. I thought that was a pretty straightforward comment, but there were several who made that statement. The bottom line is the students displayed real excellence. They respected each other. They spoke to each other in a way that was, as I said, respectful. They gave each other attention. One word that would describe the next leaders of SCASD. These are from the students. Resilient, trustworthy, easy to connect with, equity-driven, communicator, considerate, committed, accountable, passionate, interactive, transparent, consistent, respectful, responsible, flexible, courageous, humble, and disciplined. That is from the students of the State College Area School District, and those are just some excellent comments. You see there where they highlighted a series of strengths that they saw in the district, areas where they would like to see some improvements, and what qualities they would like to see in the next superintendent and in future leaders of the district. Certainly a lot's talked about of genuineness, bringing people together, experience in conflict resolution, mental health issues, transparency, educating the whole child, etc. If you look at the next page, you'll see how would you like to see the district described 5 years from now? A place that is welcoming and happy and prepares us well rather than only academics. Staff and faculty are caring and kind, which many have said they already are. And students have the best opportunity to succeed. All members put equity as a main focus on the work they do. Globally minded, future ready, front runner on inclusivity. We have a great foundation here. Final notes from the students, as you see at the bottom of page 6. We have a lot of groups that are doing too much of the same thing. We need a leader who can streamline this and bring people together. Put egos aside and do what is in the best interest of students. Not that that's necessarily a common complaint with everyone, but this is just the statement that was made. Admit when there's a mistake, then update things that are outdated or need change. We are so focused on results, we don't always have a grasp on process, but again, we have a very good foundation, and there's a lot that the students are proud of here. So it's a really interesting series of comments to reflect on. Strengths of the district, I'm just going to go through the topic areas. You see the notes in front of you. Again, this is taking probably 100 pages of comments and turning them into just high focus areas. Student opportunities and academic offerings were seen as a consistent strength. The Delta program and CTC needs to continue to be leveraged, and the culture of inclusiveness at Delta needs to be highlighted even more. Strengths also, high quality leaders, professional staff, support staff. We have a reason to believe, very strong reason to believe from all the stakeholders that we have people here that are dedicated and committed to educating the whole child. This includes the social, emotional, academic, and sense of belonging. Some of these things are also areas of concern, you'll hear, or areas of challenge, I should say. A strong sense of community. Another strength is organizational agility, resources, and facilities. One person in particular, when you visit our schools, you'll notice the floors are clean. Visitors love this when they walk in. I thought that was neat. All right, the final strength, embracing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. This topic received considerable attention with most focus groups. A clear majority of those who participated in the discussions embraced DEIB. However, there were more nuanced opinions around its priority and the implementation process of DEIB, despite a general acknowledgement of the importance of such initiatives to creating a safe, welcoming environment for all. And you can see those comments there that explain where the real strengths are in the district as it relates to DEIB. Challenges in the district: academic excellence. There appeared to be a gap between the current state of affairs, where academics are generally given good marks, but an ideal future state where there's the belief that with the resources that we have in State College, we should be best in class in the state of Pennsylvania. And how do we close that gap? What's the next chapter to lead that effort? Another challenge: diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. That's both a strength and a challenge. You can see down through the next page and a half of all of the comments, or a synthesized series of comments around DEIB, and a focus on whether or not the district is moving too quickly on certain initiatives or moving too slowly on certain initiatives, and then others who thought it's really not a matter of pace, it's more a matter of strategy. Are we strategically doing it right? So, again, you'll see a lot of comments. Some of them are what I would call thoughtfully candid, but many of these are just good, solid observations. Again, not to say that every comment is factual entirely, just this is how somebody in good faith saw it from their perch. Another challenge, hiring minority candidates for teaching and staff positions and the strategic importance of that for students who are here in the district and leaving the district, and how well that would prepare them through a diverse teaching corps, a challenge many school districts currently face. I do see I have a couple of grammatical errors in that one that I have to fix. So another challenge, morale and esprit de corps among faculty and staff. There is a lack of spirit that was identified. Part of this is just COVID-related, and it's all over school districts. Others seem to be a little bit more specific to State College. Valuing teacher autonomy and collaboration, transparency, and a culture of trust was identified as a challenge. Again, not something that is not being worked on or something that does not have legitimate traction, but there is some growth that some had noted in the stakeholder groups between where we are now and where we could be as it relates to autonomy, collaboration, transparency, and a culture of trust. School safety and student discipline was also highlighted. Some focus on the SROs was mentioned with some consistency. Restorative practices, certainly an encouragement to keep it up, but be able to explain that with a little bit more clarity for the entire school population. Another challenge, advancing and adapting the vision of the district. With so much happening in public education, things moving so quickly, being nimble and keeping the vision in such a spot that it truly does reflect a progressive school district. Also a challenge, embracing science and data with compassion and understanding, meaning not just be only data-driven, but understand the humanity behind the numbers. And again, a very good observation. We need more than STEM, as important as STEM is. Commitment to foreign languages, global citizenship, a fostered culture of innovation based upon ethical behavior and the common interests of humanity. That's a mouthful. That probably takes 5 years to put together. Couple more challenges. The competitive culture and mental health. This is something that was mentioned with some frequency. Just the fact that the mental health is becoming increasingly fragile, again, COVID-related, but not entirely. Respect and working conditions was touched on. Special education, there was consistent conversation on special education. A specific focus group on that. Tried to give you the best synthesized comments that I could from that. Finding the town-gown balance. A lot was discussed there. Respecting the work that the university does, also understanding the traditions and mores of the community itself, and finding that balance to lead and govern through. Prioritizing initiatives, how to say no. We say yes to everything here, it can be mission creep. There's strong and divergent thinking in the community, and certain voices can get heard, and how do we prioritize that? Governance, policies, and procedures, you will see that as the final comment around a challenge that needs to be addressed or could be enhanced in the district related to chain of command, roles and responsibilities, that kind of thing. 2 more minutes. What are the leadership qualities needed in the next superintendent and in leaders for the future of the district? Character and courage of convictions, accessibility and visibility, engaging diverse opinions and change management, organizational leadership, vision building and servant leadership, and finally, other qualities that you will see mentioned that didn't seem to necessarily fall neatly within any of the other categories, but they nonetheless, and there is some duplication there. Final page, page 17. How would you like the district to be described 5 years from now? Asked a lot of groups this. A district that is non-elitist and that we are truly engaged with various educational groups regionally and beyond. A deeply unified district. A district that plans well and collaborates, scales up the best practices and things like Delta, et cetera, bringing those standards district-wide. I heard that with some consistency. A district that emphasizes teacher leadership. People want to be here. Esprit de corps is high. A couple others that you'll see. A district that relates well to one another in civil, deeply respectful ways. responds to conflict with bravery, a bold vision, prepares kids for their chosen futures, understands and respects the appropriate and strategic implementation of DEIB, all the things that were mentioned previously. So, finally, the last bullet, a district with a sense of urgency, an organization that is not afraid of conflict, I don't think this one is, and a district where students see teachers that look like them, everyone belongs. This report, I think in the end, in 10 seconds to close, you heard a consistent theme about how deeply respected the people in this district are who are working to educate kids. But a critical analysis brings these things out, not necessarily as deficiencies, but as areas that, hey, here's the next chapter to work on. So I open it up for any questions or, more important, conversation from the Board of School Directors.
So I just wanted to take a minute to say thanks. Tom, I know this was an enormous amount of work. You spent a lot of time talking to many different stakeholder groups and even taking second meetings with stakeholder groups when they requested them. And so we just want to thank you for boiling it down into this document. And I also just want to mention that this document will be available to the public tomorrow on our superintendent search website as well. So now that it's been delivered, we will be giving it to the public so they can peruse it as they wish.
I just want to acknowledge, first I want to acknowledge Tom's commitment to his work, his professionalism, his effort to engage as many people as possible in the superintendent search process, his professionalism with us, and his, but mostly, it's the level of detail and attention to the level of detail that you've given and your capacity to summarize things without losing the details. I think this is really, really valuable. I think we can come back to this over and over again to review it and consider what it's telling us and how we should prioritize this stuff and relate it to our comprehensive plan. I think those challenges are there in front of us with this. I had sat in on a couple of the stakeholder meetings, and I watched some of the recordings afterwards, and it's a very, very rich but complicated set of data. And the fact that you made such a valiant effort and an effective effort to summarize, and especially the parts that I was a witness to, I think it's going to serve as a real resource for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also wanted to say thank you to Tom. It was a tremendous amount of work. And I also wanted to say thank you to all of the community members and other stakeholders that attended all of these sessions with Tom, because we understand that you took time out of your lives to communicate to the board what your concerns were, what your desires are, and that's really helpful to us, not just in the superintendent search, but in general. And it will be applied, I'm sure. I mean, I can speak for more than just myself here in our decision making as we proceed. So, and the other thing I wanted to say is that, Tom, it was really amazing to see how much effort you put into getting all viewpoints that you possibly could find. And so when the list was made, it just kept growing and growing and growing and growing because you kept asking. And that was so helpful, not only with this particular endeavor of the superintendent search, but also as a method of communication from the community to the board in general. And I think that, again, I think I can speak for more than just myself, but we're all just so appreciative that we have that now. And what you said at the beginning of your presentation, I think, is maybe one of the most important parts, which is that for us to keep looking back at this and paying attention when we make decisions to what the feedback was from this process. So anyway, just a big shout out to the process. It was so thorough, and we are so appreciative that we got, and the goal was to get as many viewpoints as we possibly could, because we respect all viewpoints and we wanted to hear them. So thank you to the community and to you as well, Tom.
Thank you. Any other?
All right, any other comments? Tom, thank you so much for being here.
You bet. Thank you. Thanks, guys. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move on to public comment. Each individual will be allotted up to 3 minutes for items discussed to this point on the agenda. For action items, public comments will be held just prior to voting on that item as required by the Sunshine Act. If additional time is necessary, the board may consider reopening public comment after board business is completed or during the next meeting. As a reminder, public comment is a chance for community members to share their thoughts with the board. It is not a time for the board to answer questions or engage in conversations. You can always email the board at all-board@scasd.org. Is there anyone in person who would like to make a public comment this evening? Please come to the podium, state your name, where you live in the district, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, Matt Lackey, and you said where I live in the district? Is that
Sure.
Is that what you said? My daughters we're in the Park Forest Elementary District. So I'm just here as, first and foremost, as a parent concerned about the women's wrestling edition. I come from a very unique perspective, being a wrestler most of my life, also being the head women's wrestling coach at Lock Haven University as well. So I've been able to see the growth and the expansion of this sport firsthand, and it's been an incredibly exciting process, especially considering I am the father of 4 girls. It used to be called the wrestler's blessing or the wrestler's curse. I've renamed that to the wrestler's blessing. And it's actually, when I was having my daughters years ago, maybe didn't think that was an opportunity for them. So it's just an incredible journey that it's been to watch it grow and to have my daughter, who you'll read in your information that Chris had provided you, is the wrestler on the team this year. She's a sophomore. She's right over here. Anna, wave. Any wrestling fans on the board? Yeah. So I didn't grow up in Pennsylvania. I grew up in Illinois, also a very tough wrestling state, but I don't have to tell you guys how incredibly tough Pennsylvania wrestling is. For those of you who don't know, it provides, or I guess it produces more All-Americans at the college level as a state by leaps and bounds over any other state in the country. It's incredibly tough here in Pennsylvania. I'm disappointed in how long it's taken the PIAA to get on board with this process. I moved here from Arkansas last summer. We lived there for a while, and they have jumped on board with women's wrestling already at the high school level. Only added boys wrestling for about 10 years now. So in that respect, Arkansas is more progressive than Pennsylvania, but that's the first time you've heard that one. But I'm excited about the 100 schools. We just hit that. And I look forward to the PIAA following suit here very, very soon. I'm here just as a parent, like I said. I think it's an incredible opportunity. Wrestling provides so much, and I'm so glad that the ladies have that opportunity to do that now. Grit, hard work, time management, learning to deal with loss. I could go on and on about all the great things that wrestling provides. All right, and I hope that you guys vote in favor of this when the time comes to do so. And I also want to open you up to any questions. I know it's not now, but if you have anything that you guys want to reach out to me on the side, like I said, I'm at Lock Haven. You can very easily find my email address. If anybody has any questions or concerns or comments, I'm here to help. Right, and I know Chris is over here as well, and he has my full support in helping grow this. This can't just happen at the high school level. This has to happen at the youth levels as well. So I'm excited to help there, and Chris has my full support there. And I know I've probably gone over my time, so I appreciate you hearing me out tonight, and thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to make a public statement? Sure, come on up to the podium, please. State your name, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Alex Butler. I'm currently a freshman at Penn State. I didn't plan on talking tonight. I didn't know women's wrestling was on the agenda for tonight, but I myself am a women wrestler. I wrestled my senior year of high school, and I have nothing but love for the sport. Like he previously mentioned, like there's such a long list of positives. I personally, the relationships I made with coaches, other girls on the team, there's only 3 of us. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of like opportunities for us, so we wrestled mostly with the men. And then now, as he also mentioned, we just hit 100 schools. I believe now it is at 101. My school was the 11th in Pennsylvania, and the voting soon will be by the PIAA whether to officially sanction it. And I just personally, like mentally, it just made me so much stronger. It made me so much more confident in my own body and just my social interactions with others. It really just changes you completely. I've never felt more strong in my life, both physically and mentally, like I had previously stated. It's just win or lose, you feel accomplished. You could go out there and just prove to yourself, like, I can take care of myself in any situation. I feel like in any case out in like the real world, I could protect myself now. And before, I didn't feel that way whatsoever. I didn't think I could go into a male-dominated sport and make it all the way to states, which I did. Unfortunately, I didn't win any or place, but just the fact of getting to that point, it really just altered my life, and I could never like wish for anything better. It was possibly the best decision I've ever made. So I highly recommend that you vote in support for this. Like he also mentioned, just having it at the high school level, you need to start building it from the bottom up. There isn't enough of us in the sport, and it is growing at a rapid rate, and I think it's very important for you guys to be involved in this movement. Okay, that's all.
Thank you so much, Ms. Butler. Is there anyone else in attendance who would like to make a public comment tonight? Go ahead. You can state your name for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lynette Brooks, and I live in Ferguson Township, and I have 2 children in Skazda Middle Schools. You may recognize me since I've attended the last few board meetings and stood here to talk about Skazda's Title IX numbers. You have a hard job. Juggling many needs. I've heard you talk about physical plant, instructional needs, provision of utilities, just to name a few. And you have the important task of steering our school district in both the proximal and distant futures. I'm not here to criticize anything or anyone tonight, only to say that I believe the school system is discussing 2 issues on tonight's agenda, which are a great step forward if adopted. The first is to bring in an outside group to evaluate Skazda's current compliance with Title IX. The second involves adding girls wrestling to Skazda's PIAA offerings, which we've obviously already heard about this evening. I hope you will vote to act on these items. I feel it is important to bring a critical eye to bear on Skazda's choices and policies regarding support for its female athletes. I also feel that providing as much inclusion as possible for girls who want to play sports will provide important educational opportunities, not only for the girls who participate in sports, but for all Skazda students. Skazda routinely reminds its students, faculty, staff, and community to look for ways to establish equity through acknowledging differences and reaching out to help bridge gaps. Establishing a PIAA girls wrestling team will provide an important example for our community, as well as letting girls play a sport that they love in a safer, more equitable way. Finally, I'd like to leave you with a quote from Hank Aaron. "Failure is a part of success. There is no such thing as a bed of roses all your life, but failure will never stand in the way of success if you learn from it." I actually didn't go over tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any other public comments in the room? Go ahead and come to the podium, state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Aaron Miller. I live in Ferguson Township. My kids go to Coral Street. Just hearing them talk about wrestling, my daughter is also a wrestler, but she's a 2nd grader who's been wrestling with reading. You like how I did that? She came into the district, Peter. She came into the district as a kid who couldn't go through kindergarten, who struggled through reading because of COVID. She got to first grade, and she was just at the bottom of the pile. And I'm just here to tell you about a huge success that I really wanted to share with you all and with the staff and anyone at home. My daughter, Emma, we just got the letter last week that she has been moved out of Title I. And I really wanted to say a special thanks to her teacher, her second grade teacher, Kelly Essick, and a huge thank you to her Title I teacher, Becky Wynn at Coral Street. They have made her love books. From a kid who couldn't read her own name, couldn't spell her own name, had no interest in anything other than the pictures, they have made her a passionate reader. And that's, to me, one of the biggest successes of the district. So just thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Anyone else with a public comment in the room? All right, I'll move to online. Is there anyone joining us remotely that would like to make a public comment this evening? All you have to do is raise your hand in the bottom part of your screen. All right, not seeing any, so we will go ahead and move on. Thank you so much. All right, it's already time for routine approvals. Moving on to routine approvals. Is there a motion to approve the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Is there any public comment on our routine approvals? All right, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney? Yes. Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
All right, next on the agenda, we have action items. Pardon me. Agenda item 6A is a motion to approve the revised board committee assignments. This is shown in attachment 6A. Tonight, we're adjusting committee assignments after appointing Mr. Jim Leos to the board during the last meeting. I want to reiterate our gratitude to Jim for stepping back into this role at this time. As he mentioned in his interview, he brings experience with onboarding a new superintendent, so his participation at this moment is a rare opportunity. Additionally, Jim has extensive experience with budget and finance, and so we appreciate board members willingly shifting roles so that Jim can serve as co-chair of the Finance and Audit Committee. Most importantly, upon his arrival, Jim has immediately made meaningful contributions to our work in a way that only an experienced board member could. So thank you so much, Mr. Leos. Could I get, would anyone care to motion to approve the revised board committee assignments?
I move to approve the revised committee assignments.
Thank you.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Is there any public comment? All right, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney? Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
All right, agenda item 6B is a motion to approve policies 121, 123.1, 800.1, 815.5, 815.6, and 815.7. These are shown in attachment 6B.
I'm not sure procedurally how to do this. Is there a way to do each one at a time?
Which one do you want to talk about first? Okay, so questions or discussions on, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, a motion that we approve
split
policy 123.1?
Separately from the others, or you want them all individually?
Yeah, that's what
Yep, we can do that.
because they're not just the simple revision, but we talked about having groups of them.
Yes.
They were very simple, but these are these are different and they're also new.
Okay, so you would like to discuss each of them
And vote on each.
and vote on each of them?
Yeah, I don't know that there'll be a lot of this.
Okay.
It's process.
Okay.
I apologize.
It's been a long time since we've had multiple policies to approve. I can submit them separately if that would help from now on.
I don't mind breaking them out. I'm also new here, so
Oh,
I'm trying to
okay.
figure out what's going on. Luckily, Scott's here. Thank you. All right, so
Yeah,
so
we
Laurel
need a-
has moved to.
So I'll second that motion.
All right, thank you so much. So we are going to consider for agenda item 6B,
So it'll be 6.
6B1.
6B2.
All right, got it. Perfect. 6B1 will be a motion to approve policy 123.1 that's been moved and seconded. So are there any questions or discussion on this policy?
I just wanted to say.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I just wanted to say thank you for the additional language that was added, that just added some, we had talked about that last time, and having some more specifics in the policy on some of what we wanted to see the actions be.
So the motion was to vote on them individually. So now we need to ask for a motion for.
To approve 6B1.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we didn't vote on, well,
I misheard the motion, and I thought the motion was to approve 123.1.
yeah, that's what I
That's
thought it
what I thought it
was.
was.
So I think we're okay.
You want them individually, though, correct?
But that's 123.1 is just one of them.
Right.
Yeah.
But you want.
So that's okay.
All of these policies voted on individually.
Correct,
Right, but you didn't make a motion for that.
She made a motion to just approve that one.
Yeah.
So we're okay.
I'm sorry, I just had to put it together.
Okay.
we're good.
Yeah, I think so.
So, yeah, so
Yeah.
then I'll just,
Okay.
each one will be its own number. Is
Okay.
that
Yep.
Okay.
Scott would yell at us if we were doing it wrong.
I've never heard Scott yell.
It's nice to have a parliamentarian in the
That
house.
was sarcasm. I'll use my sarcasm quotes next time.
I'm laughing. Okay.
Okay.
Um,
I have a comment.
please.
So I actually have a friendly amendment because there's one, it's subtle discrepancy to the regulations that we were sent that are simply a draft, but I think the regulations are probably more accurate in the way we want to go. Let me just find the spot. It's in the beginning where we state that interscholastic competition as well as league membership are requirements of a club sports team, whereas in the regulations, we state that it has to be either like a national membership or other things, or league membership, which is a little more broad, which may be more applicable for something like our rowing club. I don't know that they have a local league, but they probably belong to a national or regional organization and then go to specific competitions that aren't a league per se. So the way I read the current policy, it's specific that they have to have interscholastic competition and league membership in order to qualify. And so that would potentially exclude some situations that we did include in the regulations. So I just think the regulations probably are more accurate, and we probably just need to say that phrase, competition as well as membership in national, regional, or league, to be eligible to be a club team. Does that make sense?
Of course, since I'm quickly looking for it, I can't find it.
I know.
Where is it in the regulation?
Oh, I'm sorry. So
Under
in,
definition.
in the regulation, it's,
1B.
thank you for finding it, because I,
Ah, thank you.
you're welcome.
I went by it twice.
So I just think, I like the broader opportunity, and I just want us to, since the policy is the highest level, we should probably have the broader phrasing in the actual policy. So if the board members would accept that as a friendly amendment, then I don't know that that would keep us from continuing forward.
I accept that, if that's.
May I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Would in the policy, after it says interscholastic competition, would the words and/or league competition, hold on, now I just moved my screen and I don't have the right thing in front of my face. Pardon. It says interscholastic, under definition, interscholastic competition, currently it says interscholastic competition as well as league membership are requirements, and you want to amend that phrase? Is that
Correct.
to say, would you just
What was the
read-
number again? 2B?
1B.
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 So
B,
you're-
must have affiliation with national, state, or regional organization or league affiliation. So either of those categories, not only league. So let me get my screen side by side and I can read it as an actual sentence if that would help. To shrink them all. Now I lost where it went. Policy, okay. So the sentence would be.
So is it this and this, or this and or this? Okay.
For purposes of this policy, club sports are not currently recognized. Interscholastic competition as well as
affiliation.
national, regional, or league affiliation would be required.
You left out state. National,
Okay,
state.
yes, sorry. Well,
Or
our
regional.
state's in the region. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and Scott, would we be able to do that as something amend it without objection, or would it be a substantive change that we would have to have a roll call vote on?
I think amended without objection.
Isn't that what a friendly amendment is, that it's no objection? And I accept it as a friendly amendment.
I don't object.
I mean, it changes it to some degree, but it's not a substantive change.
Right.
to the policy as a whole.
I think especially because it's in the guidelines,
Right.
it brings them in line, as Amy said.
Cool. Thank you.
That was a lot of wordsmithing, Linda, but what do you think?
I got it.
Okay.
Thank you for being willing to make that adjustment. I think we want to make sure we're including more, not excluding.
All right. Is there any other discussion on 123-1?
So in general, I had a couple people approach me that are affiliated with various club teams that are already in existence. And they talked about the necessity not only to have the district administrator, but also somebody from the district, an employee of the district, to act as a liaison that was familiar with the sport and could be an advocate for the sport. So that's, maybe that's somewhere in the regulation. I don't think it belongs in the policy, but that was the feedback I got from a couple of community members on this.
It's not in the regulations.
Yeah.
They just reference
Right.
what do we call it?
And the the student activity administrator.
There you go.
That's what you referenced,
Right.
yeah. So I just said, that was the feedback that I got, so, I don't know that it belongs in the policy, but maybe,
Yeah, I actually had some other suggestions for the regulations, but I thought
Mhm.
we can also discuss them at policy committee tomorrow, but there was a
Yeah.
couple language things that I thought was worth reevaluating, yeah.
Yeah, so it's
But not
not
substantive.
material to passing
I
the
agree.
policy.
Right.
So that was just some of the feedback I got.
All right.
Just to be clear to the community that the board has responsibility and authority over developing policy. However, it's the administration, Linda and other members of the administration, that are then responsible for talking about how the district operationally will implement a policy. And that's the stuff of administrative regulation. So what we're talking about here is the board offering, in a sense, a kind amendment, in a sense, for administrative regulations, a respectful amendment that we would like to see or suggest based on the feedback we've received. But we don't have the authority to do that at this point. That really is, authority comes through the role of the administration.
Well, we can certainly discuss it tomorrow at the policy committee meeting. Keep in mind, hiring multiple people requires funding.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think that's something we could discuss. There could be an effort to,
Are there any other comments on the policy itself? Okay. Can we have a roll call vote now?
Yep.
Okay, yes.
Any
so
public-
glad.
please and thank you.
Any public comment?
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this policy? All right, in that case, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Mr. Leos,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney, Dr. Anderson,
Yes.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
All right, so agenda item 6B2 will be a motion to approve policy 800.1 as shown in attachment 6B.
So moved. Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? This is the
Electronic signatures.
electronic signatures policy, which we've looked at a few times, at least once here in the meeting. All right, is there any public comment on this policy? Okay, then could we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Mr. Leos,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney, Dr. Anderson,
Yes.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
All right, agenda item 6B3 is a motion to approve policy 815.5 as shown in attachment 6B.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any are there any questions or discussion? This is our acceptable use of technology policy. Is there any public comment on this policy? Then we'll have a roll call vote.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes. All right, agenda item 6B4 is a motion to approve policy 815.6 as shown in attachment 6B.
So moved.
Second.
So if I could make a comment, there was a question presented during the day about the language in the last paragraph. Scott Eder and I discussed it, believing it would probably be okay the way it was, but in an abundance of caution, we are suggesting that the yellow highlighted phrase be added to that language. So you should all have it reads, for those who don't have a paper, that would otherwise be subject to the Sunshine Act. So we're saying meetings that are subject to the Sunshine Act, we cannot refuse recordings, which is law.
Right. So it just keeps us in compliance with law.
Right.
Perfect. All right, is there any question or discussion about this policy? All right, is there any public comment? We'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
All right, agenda item 6B5 is a motion to approve policy 815.7, which is shown in attachment 6B.
Second.
All right, are there any questions or discussion on this policy?
I would just, there's a paragraph towards the end, a portion of a paragraph that I've had no problem with. So I think, and I would just suggest to the full board that we pursue, to the extent necessary, that we pursue other policies that serve a stronger and a broader protective function when it comes to the lives of students. This ensures the students of the elementary, middle school, and high school levels are educated about appropriate online behavior, including how to interact through social networks and chat rooms and so on, which are fundamental communication skills you would need in a digital world. The impact of this experience upon students is profound from what I know in terms of their mental health, in terms of their social skills. There's just a broad array of ways in which students experience, both outside school and in school, but often outside school, that impacts their lives and their mental health. And I think that deserves our attention to the extent that a committee such as CCL might pursue it in terms of considering some ways to assure prevention activities for kids to participate, to recognize a whole array of risks that occur regarding, among other things, young girls' body image, as just one example. There are probably dozens of ways in which there are dangers in this realm that deserve our attention. It's not in this policy, of course, but it might be through other development.
I'll take a look at the other policies and see if we have one that could be augmented. This one, as you mentioned, is strictly about internet filtering.
Right. And I'm not suggesting that we alter this as it stands. I'm just looking forward in terms of other opportunities for doing the right thing, because it's catching up with us. I mean, these are experiences and technologies that are still we're coming to comprehend their meaning, and particularly with the recent CDC findings regarding mental health experiences of young people. We just can't ignore it. Thank you.
Yes.
I think probably there may be policies, but the other piece of it, if it's the will of the board, not tonight, but at some point, is to talk about this in the curriculum house and needing to do it probably younger than we've been doing it, because that's really where our education function with our students is. And I think we're all realizing that it certainly wasn't in curriculum when I was in school, or even 10 years ago when my children were going through elementary school. But at this point, we do have a media piece in our academic literacy, but that's not till middle school, and it's not necessarily this type of thing. So just a thought, even more than policy.
Right.
All right. Thank you for bringing up those concerns. Are there any more comments on the policy? Is there any public comment? All right, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
All right. Agenda item 6C is a motion to approve the Title IX engagement letter with Fox Rothschild for athletics. This is shown in attachment 6C.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Laurel.
So I was just wondering what the, first how this form was selected, but also what the expected cost is for this.
Fox Rothschild is very well known in the Title IX world. They give presentations through various groups and conferences. That's how we found them. And they gave a couple presentations for us last year for our employees. So that's how I found them. As far as the cost, I asked them what the most expected cost could be. And the answer I received was, until they can review the scope of the materials, that's really not possible to give. But they should have a scope finished within about 30 days of the approval of the engagement letter.
Well, I mean, I've said several times before that things like this, I realize this is important, but I think this is exactly why things like an RFP, or at least a letter in the memo that says this is what we looked at and here's an idea, because just to sort of give a blank check, as important as this work is, concerns me. Because with all due respect to Dr. Etter, lawyers' fees can add up very, very quickly. And I don't have a sense of whether we're talking about $3,000 or $30,000 or even higher.
Well, in our dealings with them so far, they have been very reasonable in their billing hours. I'm not going to predict the future. I'm just telling you about the past.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah. Oh, God, Peter, you had your hand up.
Peter.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say that, looking at the firm themselves, they have experience in Title IX. It's very clear on their website. They are eminently qualified, and they gave us a billing rate per hour in their letter.
Correct.
Regarding the fees from their lawyers and from paralegals. So,
Correct.
I think that we can come to a reasoned conclusion about what the possible scope is, and given what we've been talking about on the board lately, it would seem to me that this would be a very reasonable expenditure.
Dr.
Yeah,
Bader?
I was going to concur similarly. I mean, I think that in your vetting them out in order to do the trainings for our district, it was very clear that they're eminently qualified. And hiring someone who's eminently qualified means an efficient process, and that means hopefully less expenditure in the long run, rather than hiring somebody who isn't quite sure the rules and what they're doing. So we know we're working with somebody who's relatively top-notch and should be able to hopefully go through this process pretty quickly. And being as we've generated a lot of the data just recently, that will all be fresh and ready available. So I don't see where we can do much more to make it expeditious and cost efficient. So I'm more than happy to continue this relationship with that organization.
Laurel?
I did go and do a little research today, and last couple of days actually, on this, and found several organizations. The ones I noted down were Association of Title IX Administrators, Institutional Compliance Solutions, that's one that's done some audits. And I also noticed that our former AD, who I knew when I joined the board was a national expert in this, also does that type of consulting. And while we may not be appropriate for this given that she's a former employee, she might also have suggestions. I'm just very concerned from what I've seen about handing basically a blank check. I'd like to ask that at least once we have that scope, as soon as possible, we get a sense of how far this could go.
Dan?
An additional layer to this, I think, comes from the fact that
I think
that this group, can I be heard? This group has been consulting and training our department for months, if not longer. I'm sorry. And thank you. Thanks a lot. And in the process of doing that, they have helped us develop the language for policy related to Title IX, and very comprehensive and detailed specifics within those proposed policies that have given guidance to us. And in that way, they've already provided some preventive services to us. And what we're looking for this is basically some preventive services, preventive support, so that we're less inclined to make a misstep in terms of our relationships with the community under Title IX. So we already have experience with them offering guidance in this way. Not the same type of thing, but essentially on this
Correct.
topic.
We believe, based on our own audit, that we are in compliance. We want a third party to tell us whether we're correct or not.
Great, thank you.
Any other discussion or questions?
No.
Any public comment? If you'd come you're already coming to the podium, but if you'd state your name once more, thank you.
I'm sorry. My name is Lynette Brooks, and I have spoken several times before on Title IX here in the district. One of my concerns is that Ms. Pierce stated that this group had done Title IX training for the district before, and admittedly, I've done zero research, but one of my concerns would be that you ended up with a Title IX suit after they trained people here at the district. I don't know who had their training and who did not. I don't know how much their training either was not taken to heart or may have missed key aspects that resulted in allowing decisions to be made and then supporting those decisions that landed the district in a Title IX suit. I would also point out that there was subsequent bullying issues that happened and that, to the parents' knowledge, have not been addressed. And that goes to harassment within a Title IX suit. So there are multiple issues here. I am not saying don't use this firm. What I am saying is please cast a critical eye on who you're asking to do this evaluation. I do believe that the evaluation should go forward. If the board feels that this group is the group to do the evaluation, I would support that decision. But look beyond fees, look at what they were supposed to teach your employees, and look at whether or not those employees learned those lessons. Does that make sense? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Jackie, can I ask a clarifying question of Linda?
Yeah, please.
So we hired Fox Rothschild, I think in the last year. Is that correct? Or has it maybe been a year and a half at most?
It was,
Two.
well, it'll be 2 years in June.
Okay. When we hired them. And so we've just rolled out trainings in that time period.
Training on sexual harassment, sexual assault,
Correct, because Title IX encompasses much more than just sports.
athletics, correct.
Correct. So, okay, so we've had a recent but significant relationship with this organization,
Correct.
with this law practice. Thank you.
Correct.
Do you have a comment, Laurel? I'm sorry.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do think it is very important that we move forward with getting an outside examination of this. My concerns, Ms. Brooke actually put it very well in terms of what's happened so far with this firm. I also, though I was not going to bring it up, we had at one point solicited as a district, this was back some years ago, a bunch of quotes of which Fox Rothschild was significantly higher than the other firms that we looked at. I, again, not sure on the policy, but I would like to table this so that those questions can be looked at and bring it back. I would hope next time to approve an outside auditor. So I guess that would be a motion to table. Is that how that's done?
All right, so motion to table this item has been made. Is there a second? All right, the motion fails then. Could we then have a roll call vote on this item?
Yep. Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
No.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 6D is a motion to approve Arbitrage Rebate Counselors LLC for arbitrage calculation for the 2018 bonds. I think I said all those words correctly. Okay. This is shown in
Rather
attachment 60.
arbitrarily, by the way.
It's shown in attachment 6D.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion?
I was just going to say, this is the kind of memo that I like, where it says, this is what it's going to cost.
Yes.
And thanks for our financial advisors for lining them up again. They've served us well.
All right, are there any other comments or questions? Any public comment? We'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Agenda item 6E is a motion to accept a major gift from Mr. Larry Beans via the State College Education Foundation for a scoreboard at Memorial Field and approve proposed signage. This is shown in attachment 6E.
So moved.
Second.
Are there questions or discussion?
It's a big thank you. A very, very big thank you.
On the scoreboard.
On the scoreboard.
On the scoreboard.
Right, exactly. Across the scoreboard.
Well, also, just to acknowledge, I know Mr. Brown and Mr. Weekland and some members of the foundation worked quite hard going back and forth with the borough to get the needs met of what the desire was for the scoreboard and to honor what Mr. Beans was hoping to see happen and also meet borough requirements. And that was a little bit of a dance to get all those things to come together. So appreciate that hard work.
Do more than a two-step.
I did. No doubt. You've been to, wow, God, you've probably been to Arthur Murray, right?
I just wanted to see you do the two-step.
I won't belabor, but as Dr. Bader mentioned, this has been a process, multi-year process, actually, because Mr. Bean's first gift of $875,000 came several years ago, and that was applied to a large portion of sections of the Memorial Field facility. And now originally this $125,000 was reserved for the scoreboard. And it was, at the time, the estimated cost of that scoreboard, including installation. There will be some, it does not cover the entire cost of the scoreboard, but there are funds available in the Memorial Field capital funds that will continue that process. And your next item will be to authorize purchase of the scoreboard. We can talk about that more further, but the foundation has been pivotal, and we thank Mr. Beans and the foundation, their directors, and their executive director.
All right, excellent. Is there any public comment on this item? We'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
All right, agenda item 6F is a motion to approve the purchase and installation of a new scoreboard for Memorial Field. This is shown in attachment 6F.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion?
So there is two amounts in this memo intentionally. One is known and one is an estimate, and we're working towards getting a more exact amendment and estimate, and we will bring forward an action item in the future once we have that cost quantified and all of the work, the scope of the work known.
Was that the fiber optic cable? Is that
Yes.
what that, okay.
Any other questions or comments? Is there any public comment for this item? We'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
All right, agenda item 6G is a motion to approve commissioning of building systems for the north building renovation. This is shown in attachment 6G.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Is there any, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just really appreciate, once again, the level of detail and the thoroughness that Mr. Fisher provides to us. You know, I know in my time on the board that the things that various board members have asked for regarding the process and like the timetables associated with things, the way what's included in a process and how our decision-making works, and then where priorities are is just really very helpful. I certainly appreciate it a lot as being the co-chair for facilities. And, you know, I think that for members of the public who are really curious about this, it gives them a level of detail that I think is pretty much above and beyond what they would expect. And I just really appreciate it a lot.
Is there any public comment for this item?
I've just one.
Oh,
a quick
I'm so
question.
sorry.
This is 6H, right? We're talking about the
6G.
renovation project commissioning. Oh,
CPT.
6G. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so we're the commissioning of building systems for the north building renovation.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, the numbers were changed. I guess I'm curious, this is, and I don't want to take a lot of time with this, just maybe in a couple of words. If we can talk about the systems that are integrated in this process, there's different systems that come together in terms of aligning with the owner's project requirements, I think, as I understand the terminology. What are the systems we're talking about, and how are they aligned, or how are they integrated?
Are you speaking as far as mechanical and electrical
Yes,
systems?
right, that kind of stuff.
Sure. So it's, we look for to put in systems that, number one, are going to provide building comfort and premium indoor air quality, right? And as well as energy efficiency.
Okay.
So that's really kind of the two of the probably the largest driving factors, right? Is really comfort, air quality, and then energy efficiency as well.
Right.
So in our commissioning process is such that it's set up to really make sure that the systems that are put in and through the design process as well are meet or meeting or exceeding our owner's project requirements.
Well, I apologize for taking everyone's time with this, and particularly yours, Mike, but But this is a new process with which I'm relatively unfamiliar. We'd had other projects we were involved with before, but I don't recall, maybe I missed it, but I don't know if there was much reference to commissioning previously. But this is helpful to me, and hopefully to others as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? We'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney? Yes. Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
All right, agenda item 6H is a motion to commit 15 million kilowatt hours of annual electricity to the solar power purchase agreement for a 15-year term. This is shown in attachment 6H.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Yes, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you. Since this motion came from a member of the board and not from a member of the administration, I was hoping that a member of the administration would be willing to give us the administration's recommendation. Mr. Brown?
My recommendation, and I believe that is coupled with Mr. Fisher's recommendation, was provided last week, or last board meeting, and that would be that the annual volume would be at a cap of 12.9 million kilowatt hours. That's based upon our projected annual energy use being at about 15.2 million kilowatt hours after factors of remediation and renovation and that type of, and upgrades. And that would be the maximum of, we started at 19 million right now, and then we are projecting the improvements. And that's based upon the board's direction that I had last received back in May of '22. If upon further reflection of this option, I do have some reservations surrounding the SPPA that I feel like I need to share, doing my due diligence and obligation to the board. I still am very concerned about the length of term of this contract. And I've been very open with many of you and in the process with the project management team. The contract being 15 years without an opportunity of a buyout is something that, again, I've mentioned before. And settlement costs, I've Dr. Buck and probably Ms. Brandt and I have had many conversations about that. And then the opportunity to buy renewable resources, energy from renewable resources, I absolutely think that that's something that the district, under the sustainability initiative and policy, should consider. But shorter lengths of time and other options have not been considered yet at this time, and so I would just recommend those. And so our recommendation on volume, which is the discussion of tonight, but I just thought I'd share these other concerns as well. It has not changed.
Great. Thank you.
Go ahead, Laurel.
Did you have an opportunity, or have you had an opportunity to see if we would be able to do more of our traditional contracts, but for renewable, for green energy, basically?
Yes, I have. And these quotes were as of January 27th of this year, and they would be of similar terms that we have had before. Of 12, 24, 36, 48 months. And they would be roughly right around 7 cents a kilowatt hour, equivalent to, right now we're at right around 4.7% or cents per kilowatt hour.
But that's the one that's expiring, and
That
you've
is
been pretty
correct.
lucky this past year, as I recall.
Well, it was a several-year agreement.
Right,
And
but-
it was a very favorable environment at that point in time.
Right.
And if we were to purchase Brown Energy, which is what that was, in the future, again, back in January, the 12 to 60 month quotes were plus or minus 8 cents a kilowatt hour. But again, they were taken at two different times, and there could have been, I don't even know what they would be today. I'm just giving you the quotes that I have available.
Thank you, because I know I'd asked that last time. I appreciate the information.
And that's why I gathered the information, is that I knew that someone either had or was going to ask.
Dr. Crevecore.
Randy, one of the concerns, which is a concern of a lot of people, is the time frame, the 15 time frame. And I was looking at other SSPA online, and a lot of them have termination fees. Is it possible for us to get a termination fee if we didn't want it to last that long, or if for some reason it didn't suit us? Could we negotiate that? And would that be something that you would be comfortable with if we could?
That has not been discussed to my knowledge.
I mean, I'm happy to say a little bit about that. You can terminate any contract.
Right.
You know, you will incur a termination fee, and what the results of that would be, we would, I believe, see in the contract, which should be under legal review, right, for the power purchase agreement.
Well, the outline that you sent us today, it said that if one of the groups wanted to leave, they would have to have someone buy their energies. And other than that, if no one wanted to, then they would have to remain for the remainder of the years. There was nothing about a termination listed, so this is what prompted me to ask this question.
Yeah, I'm just saying you can attempt to terminate anything. The terms of that are going to be in the contract itself. And because of the nature of these projects, which need long-term revenue to keep going, right? I mean, they don't work unless you have, unless you want to pay a very high amount early for a shorter period of time, or you have a 15, 20, or 25-year term on them. Penn State has a 25-year term with Lightsource BP, right? That's typical. Getting them shorter than that, I'm sure Mr. Brown and Ms. Brandt can remember that when we were having the discussions in the project management team, and we did put out for shorter time frames. We did not get shorter time frames. So we have the time frames that we have, which are 15 years with the option for 2 5-year extensions. You know, and when the contract, assuming the contract shows up, you can reject it. All we're talking about is a volume commitment. The motion on the floor is for a volume commitment.
Laurel, go ahead.
So trying to be concise as requested, I had sent, I don't know if you all got to see it, but you'd asked about a possible other suggestion, and I had suggested 13 million. And I had based that on, and this is actually partly a question for Mr. Brown and Mr. Fisher. When I had gone back and looked, it looked like in 2018-19, we were just over 14 million. And the new high school was already online at that point. We've jumped up to 19, and I'm wondering how it went so much higher, given that the high school was already online. And I noticed that in your memo last time, you had said that the recommendations you were giving were minimum that you thought we could do, which to me implied that you think we might be able to do better, which would make sense to me. Can you talk a little about that?
So, 18, 19, the systems were built. New buildings coming on that are larger will have an impact, although new buildings are more efficient. I wasn't here, I can't tell you what those differences were, as far as those trends go. However, with the maximized outside air we had with COVID, which we're still in, that's really what I'm seeing as far as a big driver, really, of what's it's 0 degrees out. We're bringing a lot more 0 degrees air in. We have to heat it. Summertime, same thing. It's 95 degrees out, high humidity. We have to bring that moisture out. We have to get that temperature down, right? So it takes a lot more energy to do that. So that's really a big driving factor. Oak Park Forest Middle is not super efficient, and then neither is Mount Nittany Middle, but I'm hoping with the remediation project this summer that we'll be able to start scaling some of that back as well, and not necessarily only outside air, but also just some of our simultaneous heating and cooling and so on and so forth to try to keep that humidity level down that the envelope is really allowing in. So that, along with an aggressive, retro commissioning effort that we plan on starting here still in Q1, I'm hoping, that we can really drive that down even further. So.
Can you ask the first part of your question again? You referenced the high school was online.
Was already online at the time that we were told that the annual energy usage was, I think, around 14 million and little over 14 million.
So that was the calendar year of 2018.
I thought it was 18, 19 fiscal year.
No, I verify. I'm
okay.
I'm verifying for you that.
Oh, thank you.
That may have been miscommunicated.
Got it.
But it was calendar of 18. So the high school would not have been completely online.
Not completely,
yet.
right. We'd moved in, but it wasn't fully
Correct.
done.
As
for a
well
while.
as the other buildings would not have been brought online, where we're now moving air that we weren't before.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I just was trying to put together
I understand. Yep.
how it had jumped so much, which piece of it, and which piece then might
Right.
be able to be
And
scaled
again,
down.
as Mr. Fisher said, we're moving more air, and then we're
Right.
moving more. We've been moving more air than ideally or according to code requirements because of COVID.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for the explanation. So anyway, that's how I got to where I got.
Ms. Brandt.
I just wanted to chime in and let everyone know that so far, the county is in 100%, Patton Township is in 100%, CATA is discussing 100%, but Bruce Donovan the entire time has been assuming that his board is probably going to want to go in at 100%.
Or not at all.
The water authority's in at 100%. The borough is in at 100%, will be soon. This is from conversations with Jesse Barlow, the chair of that council. And Ferguson Township is at 75 to 100%. When the county discussed it, their thought was, why would we not do 100%? Why are we even talking about this? And they've been kind of shocked that this much back and forth has happened amongst SCASD. So I just wanted to give some perspective how the other entities are perceiving this amazing possibility that we have in front of us. The other thing is that the 15-year, this is what I've been hearing, 15 years, it's so long. And as Dr. Buck mentioned, in the, 3 years now that we've been attending these meetings?
3.5.
3.5, excuse me. This topic has arisen, all the questions that have been asked here have been asked multiple times in the project management team meetings and the working group meetings. And this is, as Peter mentioned, this 15 years is that's how you get the good price per kilowatt hour, right? Because the solar developer has to go build it. And so there's an investment there. And so the longer the contract, the better the price you get. Where it hits the point of being feasible is a minimum of 15 years. a minimum. And that's how solar works. And we're not used to that, right? We're used to these short-term contracts with traditional power. This is a whole new world for all of us. And this is the way that things are going, right? Is to renewable energy. And so it's just, it's really, you have to kind of wrap your head around a new way of thinking because we're looking forward into the future with renewables. So it's going to be a longer contract than you're used to because solar works differently. That's why the 15 years. Hold on one sec. Oh yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention is that the new physical plant building will be adding 100 kilowatt hours. And I know we haven't talked about it much, but another issue that is coming, just as renewables are coming, That's the future. Another issue is the transition to electric buses. That's coming. That's not going to not come. And so in thinking about our commitment, which again, as Peter mentioned, that's what we're talking about right now is our actual commitment for the amount. Like, why would we not be thinking about what we're going to be needing within the next 15 years? Because we will be needing more electricity because of the transition to electric school buses. So if we can lock in, we have the opportunity right now to lock in a good price, and that's part of the opposite of risk, right? That we're getting that guaranteed low price for those 15 years. And when we're picking right now, tonight, the amount, we want to be thinking what our usage will be like over the next 15 years. Our usage will increase with the onset of electric buses. So I know we're not there yet, but some districts are already there, and hopefully ours will be within the next 15 years. So just another thing to think about in terms of our comfort level with the 15 that we're talking about tonight. And now I am finished, and I think that the gentleman next to me has had his hand raised for a while.
Dr. Buck?
Yeah, I would also just really reiterate some of the things that I had written in a memo to you all, which is that the difference, say, between 13 million and 15 million kilowatt hours is, I don't know, 1,500 tons of carbon dioxide, right? And if you apply the social cost of carbon to that, at $51 to $185 a ton, you can do the math on that if you want to. You're talking about tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars of avoided damage that the school district does not currently have to pay because it's not included in the cost of fossil fuels, right? And so I think it is the moral thing to do to incorporate that into our decision-making as a shadow price that we could or should be paying through some market were it incorporating those into what we were doing. And our region, as I said, overwhelmingly supports local governments adopting renewable energy at 100%, not at 79%, not at 64.7% or whatever. 77% of property owners in the center region and 81% of renters think that local government should go 100%. Now, the average between those is 79%. 79% is the proportion of the electricity it's just serendipity, it's just pure luck, if it's even luck, that's in there. And, our kids tell us this all the time. My kid comes home from school, and he talks about climate change. I mean, he's my kid, too, so of course he's going to talk about climate change. Everyone's like, yeah, that's self-selection, Peter. But, you know, my friends' kids talk about it. We have elevated levels of depression that I'm not going to attribute to climate change, but in the realm of things that kids say they despair about, besides bullying, feeling disconnected, et cetera, is that we are not doing what they are like yelling at us to do. And I guess, you know, I don't think it's too much to ask to put in an ambitious number that pushes us a bit to do something that maybe some of us are a little bit uncomfortable about, because our kids and our public are saying, would you just do it? Period. And, you know, the number is clearly negotiable. It can be 13 million, it can be 12.9, it can be 12.6, you know? I just think that we ought to just finally get to a decision to put into the volume commitment. And if someone wants to change the number in the agenda, then let's get to work on that, because I don't think we're going to learn anything new tonight.
Dr. Crevecoeur.
Yes, Gretchen, I really appreciate what you just said about how you put everything in perspective, and I appreciate all the work that you've done on this. It's really commendable, you and Peter. And Peter, I just want to say thank you also for responding to a lot of my questions that I would email you about and clearing things up for me. And I do appreciate a lot of the work that you guys put into it. So I know it's a little frustrating when we come out to you with all these questions also, but we just kind of just wanted to make sure everything is clear.
Mm-hmm.
But I appreciate a lot of the work that both of you have been putting into it, and I just want to say that.
And if I can just say, I know I just get like intense and heated as a human being. I'm not mad at anybody. It's just the state of my voice. So thank you all for working with me. I really appreciate it.
And questions are good.
And questions are good.
Miriam.
I just know that speaking on a student level, across all schools, I know how passionate students are about climate change, and I know that a lot of students I've talked to are really, really excited about this, and we all just kind of wanted to get it done. So I definitely think that when you consider that student voice, it doesn't matter, and I really hope you can negotiate a number, but it's just really, really important to students as well. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any more questions? Oh,
Did I? Yeah.
Jim?
No, yeah, well, I just think a couple things is, you know, I worked on this early on, and I think this is a great thing. This is really a super thing that the whole region has done. It's not just State College, although we are the predominant member of the coalition, but it's all sorts of municipalities and municipal entities. I would ask if you would talk just a little bit about the escalation factor, because I think you have a good statement about that, and it was spoken about 2 meetings ago, and I don't think we really addressed it tonight at all. But I just have to say, in 15 years, I think advances in material science will make this look like we're paying too high a price, but at that point, everybody will be in the same boat, so I think we'll be okay. So if you could, you know, talk about escalation.
Sure, yeah. So it will start at a very cheap rate. That rate is less than half of what the current commercial rate is out on the market. The current commercial rate that I looked at the other day was 10.5 cents. So it would be less than half of that. There's a 1.5 so we would have a starting rate at the time that the PPA goes into effect, right, when it is on. And it is a 1.5% escalator, and that is an increase of about 23% over the 15 years. And depending on when you run a 15-year trend going from previous years to now, you can end up with different levels of escalation, right? And using a market that did not have as much solar in it, did have 3 Mile Island in it, did not have a war in Ukraine in it, did not have a price on carbon for entrance into RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which could show up, right, is likely to show up. So running a 15-year trend retrospectively, according to our energy services consultant, is not a terribly useful thing to do. But if you want to, you can end up with a 1.6% year on year, a 1.7% year on year. You can end up with, over a 15-year trend, a 21%, not a 23% increase, or a 48% increase. And what that shows me is that there's certainty that that thing is going to move around a lot, and that it's volatile, and that the risk we're managing financially, not the carbon risk, not the risk of going against public opinion, et cetera, these other risks, moral hazard, is that you have price certainty. That's what you have. And that certainty ends up, it will either move the board to just accept it or not, because we know what's going to be there.
Well, let me just add, though, that the energy consultant, when talking about this issue, he showed us the possible fluctuations, and that almost in all statistical likelihood, you're going to be fine, and that unless you enter at the wrong time and leave at the wrong time, which is highly, highly, highly unlikely, then that's not going to happen. And so that's why it's actually more stable than maybe some of the wording that was just, no offense. But when we talked about this in the project management team, it was the energy consultant made it clear how stable it actually is. And then you can't forget about inflation anyway. And so that's gonna happen no matter what. So anyway, just wanted to add that.
Dan?
Yeah, just quickly. Peter, you were talking about listening to your son. The voices I've been listening to are the voices of my two new granddaughters, who will be high school graduates in 2040. Hopefully they get that far.
Maybe 39.
Maybe 39, right, exactly, if they're accelerated. This is a runaway train. And talk about volatility. The climate is enormously volatile. Now, we're not all youngsters here. Maybe one of the less young of everyone. And what I want to say is that in my lifetime, I mark it back to about 1970 or so as a real stable time in terms of the way the climate was functioning. And in the years since then, particularly since 1985, I remember some of the changes happening in the borough in terms of a really unusual warm day in January, or it might be an extraordinarily hot, dry period in the mid to late 80s. But it's only gone downhill since, and it's a runaway train. This can only get worse. The best predictor of future behavior in terms of the climate has been the recent behavior of the climate. And I don't think there's any room for cost cutting in that department or underestimating need. I think the need is there. It's frank, it's obvious. There's a reason a lot of people in our community are supporting 100% coverage. There's a real reason for that, and that's because they've been around as well. So that's my position on this particular topic. I don't think it's negotiable. And there may be some costs to this, but we're also absorbing enormous costs in the way the climate is currently operating, in terms of the costs we're already paying for it. So we can add that to any additional costs that might occur incidentally as a result of implementing it at this level. So, and I really appreciate the work that Randy does and that Mike does every day. I think they have a real clear, focused, business-oriented, in a sense, financially oriented sense about it. And we've been through some crazy times when it comes to some financial decisions in the past that cost us a lot of money to extricate ourselves. This is not the same, by the way, what I think about the agreement regarding the financial institution in Canada that we worked really hard to get out of. It was an enormous cost, but it's not that kind of cost. It's not the same.
No.
So,
No.
it's not the same. So I want to be real clear about that. that, I don't mean to commingle those two ideas either. I just think we're on the right track by taking the high number, whatever the high number is. And my granddaughters have informed me that kind of spiritual, I'm hearing the voices. They're saying, don't go small on this. Take this very, very seriously.
All right, Laurel?
Yeah, thanks. I actually wanted to try to bring it back to the amount, and, anyone, to me, the ambitious thing is to actually cut our usage. And the way I read the last memo was that we can do better than this 15 million that we've been talking about. And so that is why I went back and looked at the numbers, and I appreciate the correction that Mr. Brown gave us a few minutes ago. But still, I think we can actually do better. And I agree that it's not just about cost, but it's also ridiculous to buy energy we don't need. And I would like to see us cut down more. If we go just with 15, there's really no incentive to do even better in cutting back. And I think we can do that. The electric buses thing, when I had looked into it, it looked to me, I do think that's the wave of the future, absolutely. But I also think that will probably need to be its own facility and garage that we could then from what I understand, do completely separately from this, because we don't even have that facility yet. So just to be clear, my suggestion was not, let's not do this. It was, you said, let's look at numbers. We started with 15, but it is not unreasonable for us to look at what things are and say, okay, and that's how I came up with the 13. It wasn't trying to say throw it all out. It wasn't saying don't go big.
No.
It was saying look at the other factors around here and ways of calculating.
Just to be clear, I did not hear that, Laurel, and I appreciate that.
Are there any other questions or discussion? Oh, Dr. Anderson, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to point out a couple of things, and I guess to clarify, like Laurel, I'm enthused about solar energy. I just want to get the number right if we can. So I just ask a lot of questions. I'm not going to reiterate everything Mr. Brown said, but to me, the logic was very sound. And I think Peter even said this, we want to think about our future energy use. We got an estimate from our administration about what our future energy usage might be. And that would be a little bit over 15 million kilowatt hours. Gretchen's point about electric buses is well taken, but I do wonder, like Laurel, would that be an extra transportation building where we could put solar panels on the roof and that could run our electric buses? That's a possibility, I would assume. So does that necessarily mean that our electricity usage goes up in the future? I don't know. The administration didn't put electric buses in their estimate. So I'm just, going with what they had recommended. If we stick within the power band of estimated electricity use, you're at 12.9 or approximately 13 million kilowatt hours. The 15, to me, just seems high because it's 99% of our estimated use. And I don't want to buy energy we don't need. The cost comparison, I'm sure that the rate is good. I think we're using the wrong number for the cost comparison because we've never paid the commercial rate. I looked up our rates. Our rate in 2010 was 6 cents per kilowatt hour, and it fell over the time period, and we're at currently 4.98 cents per kilowatt hour. Randy said we could get a short-term contract at 7 cents per kilowatt hour, so to compare it to 10 cents per kilowatt hour seems to be the wrong comparison. That said, it's still a really good rate. I give you that. And even with a 23% inflator, you're not going to be up to 7% again. But I don't know. I personally am nervous about the 15 kilowatt hour. If the rest of the board wants that, I'm perfectly supportive. I'll just vote no on that number and vote yes for the SPPA later, happily, right? No problem with that. If we're looking for a consensus number, we could consider something more like what Peter suggested at the end of our last meeting, which would be something like 13.7, which was in the middle of what you had recommended last meeting and what I had talked about last meeting. I'm pretty flexible. I feel comfortable if I have to vote no on the 15, if that's the will of the board, 100% behind you and we can move forward. I might not vote for the 15 purely because I'm nervous about that number, but then I will enthusiastically vote for the SPPA in the future. Thanks.
We already have a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
There's already a motion.
Public.
Oh, would anyone like to make public comment on this item? All right, if you come to the podium and state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mark Kissling. I'm a parent in the district. I have 2 kids, a 1st grader and a 4th grader at Radio Park Elementary. My son Ollie is hiding behind a book here. He's a 4th grader. Ollie came directly here from intramural skiing at Tussey, where he has a lot of fun. But he wanted to be here because he knew you were going to be talking about this issue, which we've been talking about in our household. This is about leadership. It's about moral leadership. As I wrote to the board, it's about economic leadership and the notion of economy that is managing our surroundings. What are we doing about climate change and what can we do? I think of the tremendous climate scientist Katharine Hayhoe, who says the most that everyone can do is talk with people about it and work in their spheres to act. And this is action in your sphere. You can lead on this. And you think about Dr. Duffy's granddaughters, my son, all the kids who see this action. Whether they're learning about it in school or not, they are compelled to think about what's happening. So I really want to say this is a leadership stance. And, frankly, I'm kind of surprised about 2 things. One, the amount of discussion. I think it's important to have questions and deliberate. But the framing around it is surprising to me. This is such a massive issue. But the second thing that surprises me is that we're not at 100%. We're not talking 100%. And think about why are the other municipalities going with 100%. So that's surprising to me. But I want you to think about this is leading on this issue, taking action that we, SCASD, can take, not to solve climate change, but to push forward in a realm that we live within. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, is there anyone else who'd like to provide public comment in the room? All right, then I see Joan Bouchard, your hand is up. Would you like to provide comment now?
She's muted.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, yes. Go ahead.
Oh, good. All right, that's good. I wanted to thank you all for this opportunity to express my views and all the hours you've worked on this plan. And I've given this a lot of careful consideration, done a lot of reading through comments, and I think it would be the wise thing and the right thing to go with this 79% allocation, the 16 million kilowatt hours, into the solar power purchase agreement. First of all, these 15 million kilowatt hours, if I understand it correctly, that's still only 79% of our usage. So we've got 21% of our current usage that would definitely be able to be reducing all the amounts that we're putting into buying electricity on the other side from our provider that we're going to get billed by. So I don't see that there's a problem with this amount. And I do see that there is a great advantage because this solar power purchase agreement begins with an under market rate, which it's been said is maybe about half of what the going rate for buying outside the plan would be right now. And the yearly increase of no more than 1.5%, that's going to be likely to be much less than the increase in cost of living. And the 15-year contract, which makes sense to me, means that you have protection against rising prices in the fossil fuels-based electricity market for all of those years. It's a really important hedge against inflation. And that's my reasoning, and it's what I hope that the board is going to do tonight. And I have a couple of comments about what other participants are doing. According to John Franek and Amber Concepcion over at the Center County, they're going to go with 100%. So it's definitely true that the entities are lining up towards using a larger figure than we're even considering using. And the other thing that drives my decision isn't economic at all. The students at all levels of our school system, they're really looking to us for action so that they can live in a livable world that we're going to leave them. And this is most noticeable and quantifiable at the high school level, where the students admit to experiencing stress and anxiety and even suicide ideation at numbers that have never been seen before.
Ms. Bouchard, that's your 3 minutes.
Pardon me?
That's your 3 minutes.
Oh, that's my 3 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. And my granddaughter, who's looking for an internship, really wishes that the solar power purchase was in effect right now, because she would be interested in looking into it. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. All right. Douglas Mason, would you like to make a public comment? Yeah, so you're going to have to unmute on your end, Mr. Mason.
I'm sorry.
There, we can hear you now.
Okay. I'm the chair of the local Sierra Club Buchanan group, and we are 100% behind what you're doing. We really think you should be pushing for the 15 million kilowatt hours because of things that Dr. Buck elucidated relative to what's going to happen environmentally if we don't push for a maximum usage of solar power. So I just wanted to say that I'm supportive, and I live in Patton Township, and I'm really proud that our township's gone to 100%. And I think the closer you get to 100%, the better as well. So I just wanted to say I'm in support of the 15 million kilowatt hours and also the 15-year commitment as a contract.
All right, thank you for your comment. David Stone, would you like to make a public comment?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is David Stone, and I'm speaking tonight for the Nittany Valley Environmental Coalition. And you'll remember last time I kind of made a plea for 100% in terms of leadership, in terms of an example, and in terms of setting the ripples out all here through Central PA. And I think the $15 million figure, I mean, you could go higher, but that can plausibly be looked at as 100% if you take the steps to reduce your current usage of 19 million down to that number. And if you go beyond, there's other ways to sop up the excess through not a full electric bus program, but certainly a pilot program, electric charging stations for staff, a few vehicles would easily, and there'll be places to sell the electricity within the PPA for those places which don't go to 100. So I don't see the hedge and dropping the number to 14 or 13 and a half. I don't see how that makes any financial difference. It just sends the signal that somehow the deal is dicey or unstable. And if there are concerns at the end about the contracts, about all the fine details, that can still be dealt with. But a good solid number now, I think, puts you in the best position to negotiate those fine details. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment. Dorothy Blair, would you like to make a public comment?
I am Dorothy Blair. I live in Harris. I'm the president of Nittany Valley Environmental Coalition. And I want to reiterate that this is such an important decision. I agree with the gentleman who talked about his children really reducing the depression and anxiety. This is such an incredible step to do that. So I think you should go as high as you possibly can. And think about those electric buses. Why pay for their electricity with electricity that is from fossil fuels? It doesn't make sense. So please go as high as you can and think of it as money well spent. You can reduce your costs in other ways, but not this way. This is what we can do for the environment. It's imperative that we do it. Thank you very much for letting me talk.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else who would like to make a public comment on this item?
Jackie.
Dr.
Before
Bader?
you go to the vote, I guess I didn't speak before, and after some of the comments, I did want to make one observation for the community, and I'll try to keep this really short. I support the SPPA for all the reasons that we've all discussed, for the moral, ethical leadership, the financial benefit to our district, the stability of our costs, the fact that we will lock in a low rate for a long period of time when we know that the energy market is going to be volatile. All those really excellent reasons. The one thing I wanted to comment on that Dr. Kissling brought up was about why we are not at 100%. And part of our job here on the board is to be fiscally responsible with taxpayer money. And the difference between us and the other entities in the SPPA is we are the biggest entity. We have the largest amount of energy purchase. And that also means we have the most volatility in terms of fluctuation. So when we look at something like Ferguson Township, their energy needs are relatively stable over long periods of time. And much, much, much smaller. So we're dealing with a much larger amount with a lot more potential for variation. And so going at 100% adds more risk for us than it does for other entities. And so that's why I'm comfortable sticking in the 80% range, because I know we have opportunities, as other people have mentioned, to do other kinds of energy purchases, look for other green energy for that other 20%. We may put solar panels, say, on our physical building, or if we build a new bus depot. So there are other opportunities to continue to work towards using green energy to that 100%, but our job is to balance those risks for our taxpayers and our community. And so for me, the 80% at an entity of our size is the responsible way to go. So I just wanted to clarify a little bit about the difference between us and some of the other municipalities and organizations that are going at 100%. There is a different risk profile that we have to look at, and that's really a big part of why things are different for us. So I respect Mr. Brown's concerns about different things, and I think Dr. Anderson has really reasonable reasons. When it comes down to it, for me, the difference between 13 and 15, when we're talking about a budget line item that's less than 1% of our budget, I mean, we're getting down into smaller amounts of dollars that just I'm not eager to quibble over this evening. So, so I hope that's clarifying for the public. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. So just as a reminder, the motion on the floor that's been seconded is to commit to 15 million kilowatt hours of annual electricity to the solar power purchase agreement for a 15-year term. All right, so we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Huff.
Oh, yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
No.
Dr. Anderson.
No.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
May I say one more thing, Jackie?
Briefly, yes.
Yes, very briefly. As for all we've heard, I appreciated very much what Dr. Bader said. And in terms of the leadership, because we are the biggest, I also wanted to just mention that it is the districts, without the district's participation, from from what I understand, it couldn't have happened, and that we have devoted a tremendous amount of staff time. Thank you very much, Mr. Brown, Mr. Fisher. But Mr. Brown has, he's been on all of those meetings, so I appreciate the spirit in which it was meant, but there's a part of me that wants to say, wait a minute, to talk about this board, whether we did, even if we did less than we did, to say that we haven't been supportive and looking forward, we have been. We have adopted a leadership position as a district in this area.
Agreed. And I don't think anyone on the board would say anyone on the board has been unsupportive of this project.
We've all been supportive.
There's been a lot of enthusiasm.
And this project would not be here if it weren't for Randy.
Yep.
That is 100% true.
100% true.
100. I brought him a little token the other day that will never see the public light of day, but because I personally and professionally appreciate Randy for every single minute that he put into this project. All differences aside, this is where we are is a feat in governmental cooperation.
And I'll add that Randy learned a lot in a very short amount of time and was able to communicate it to a variety of audiences to get them to comprehend it. And thank you, Randy.
All right, moving on to.
That's sincere.
That was.
I wasn't.
It's amazing.
Thanks, Randy.
There's that pause. That
Let's
was
do the
waiting.
next thing, and then we'll take a short break.
Okay.
Okay. So, agenda item 6I is a motion to approve a change order for Memorial Field lighting upgrade. This is shown in attachment 6I.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Is there any public comment on this item?
Hold on, you got a comment.
Oh, I'm so
Is
sorry.
this okay with the Borough State College? Okay.
The answer was yes.
So just checking. I saw some of the capabilities that the new lighting would have, so.
All right. Is there any public comment on this item? All right, we'll have a roll call vote.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Zinni.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes. All right, we'll take a 5-minute break, recess. I'd like to, you guys good? I'd like to call the meeting back to order. I guess I should have done that first. Okay, I'm learning. We're just gonna.
No, I'm good.
We've decided to do information discussion on item 7B first, before 7A. So next we have a new sports proposal for girls wrestling. Mr. Weekland will provide this overview.
Excuse me.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I believe everyone received the proposal where it goes over the overview of the history of girls wrestling and how that could be impactful in State College community as well as our female student athletes. I'm excited about where we are. It took a while to get to this point, but we're excited to be here, and we appreciate your attention to this. I don't think I could speak as powerful as the speakers here earlier today about the value of girls wrestling. I've had the fortunate opportunity to attend a couple girls wrestling tournaments this year, and to see the courage, the strength, the confidence that these young ladies possess is amazing. And as a father of a female athlete, I saw everything that it instilled in her, in my daughter. And I'm excited to see how this can grow within our community, and the State College can build this girls program and provide opportunities for young ladies that they currently don't have, and to build our program. So thank you.
Excellent. Are there any questions or discussion for Mr. Weekland?
So I too appreciate all the comments earlier, and I just want to put forth, aside from that this being a historical effort in the state of Pennsylvania and has been ongoing for a long time, I was on the CSA for athletics probably 4 or 5 years ago, and this was a topic of discussion at that point. So this is not something new. This is not a reactionary choice to bring this forward. This has been in the works for quite a long period of time. I just wanted to clarify that history a little bit. The one thing that would be helpful to me when it comes back to us for potential approval is just on the financial side, in comparison to some of the head coaching salaries that we had on our HR report tonight. This is kind of higher than some of the other foundational high school programs. So I would just like some helpful understanding of that when we discuss it. It doesn't even have to be tonight, but I know many of the other programs are around $5,700 or $6,000, and this one is quite substantially higher for a new program that might have a smaller number. I know that there will be the building of the program, but for me as one individual, it would be helpful to have some kind of justification for why that number is what it is.
I did parallel this off of the boys wrestling.
Okay.
Coaching salaries and benefits and tournament fees, transportation based on that.
Okay.
For the high school. The high school.
Yeah, that's understandable. I just.
It depends also on how many girls we have.
Correct, right.
So how many coaches we will need, and that sort of thing.
Right. This said head coaching salary at $8,400, and that just that gets upwards to like our football coach. So I wasn't sure how we're deciding those fees, if it's based on the size of the program, being that we have some of the track coaches with big programs that aren't at that level. So I just would like to better understand that about the equity and parity between our programs and our coaches, that we're dealing with that in a responsible fashion, because I was struggling to understand the comparison.
Sure. The equity there was between within our wrestling program, not necessarily compared to other coaches. So we can look at that.
Okay, yeah. That, to me, yeah, the size of the program certainly is also really highly relevant, I would think.
And we want to get that right person in place to build that too, without a doubt.
I agree. But we're adding an expenditure too. So,
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Brandt.
Thank you. So I just wanted to say I support this, and we're in info discussion, but I plan on voting yes. Your comments earlier, honestly, I got goosebumps when you talked about your experience with your wrestling history, and I love your T-shirt. It says.
Lock Haven Women's Wrestling?
Yeah, from here, the only thing I could see was women's wrestling really, really big. And considering your comments, perfect T-shirt that you wore tonight. Those are my comments.
Oh, yes is good.
Yes!
We don't. All right, are there any other comments? Mr. Weekland, thank you so much.
Thank you, appreciate the opportunity.
I just want to make, I'm unsure, but do we need, no? We're good? Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, going back to 7A, Mr. Brown is going to be joined by representatives from Crabtree Rohrbach to provide an update on the attendance boundaries and facility analysis. Thank you so much for coming this evening.
Okay, thanks, board members. So we've invited John Badia, who is to my immediate left, and then Fred Witham, Dr. Fred Witham, on his left, to join with Ms. Yoder and myself, Mrs. Yoder and myself. And this is a first pass for you, since we provided some information previously at Facilities and Grounds. We are very excited about what we have to share with you tonight. We believe that this is going to be really beneficial, and we are hoping to move this process forward a lot faster than it has so far this year. We're hoping that, over the next couple months to get you additional information so that we can make some really good informed decisions. What those decisions exactly entail about our enrollment and our facilities, we don't even know all of that answers yet. We have some ideas, and we could speak to those if you would like tonight, or we can wait and do that at a future time. But I'll turn things over to Dr. Witham right now to, as he's put most of this materials together. Jeff Straub, who many of you know from our previous projects, is also working with the Crabtree team and provided some input for this presentation. Go ahead.
Doctor, you want to say anything before I start? I think tonight a good takeaway is we'll try to show you our thought process. This is an incredibly complex and lengthy process. So what we want to do by the length of this document that we handed out is to give you some of the feedback. We're not going to go into the detail of every single thing, but it shows you the thought process of how we're arriving at ultimately what you need as a board, a defendable position when asked about these planning numbers and enrollment. So I do want to point out, we hadn't formally introduced Dr. Witham previously other than the Zoom meeting. Dr. Witham is a retired superintendent from Cumberland Valley School District that joined Crabtree Rohrbach Associates a few years ago. In fact, I think the luckiest person to have retired before the pandemic without knowing it. Dr. Witham brings expertise to the architecture side of what we do in terms of planning. So want to offer our opinion and show you our thought process tonight and walk you through. As Randy said, there's a lot more information to come, but hopefully we'll show you the breadth of what we've accomplished with the administrative team's efforts so far. Thank you. Our first step in the process was to really identify how many seats are in your buildings and how well those seats can be scheduled within your buildings. That's not a diagram of your building for safety reasons, just a general generic one, but we spent a considerable amount of time with your administrative team going through each elementary school, identifying each space and how it is currently being used. And we compared those to the original drawings for each building, where you can clearly see what the intended capacity was meant to be. And then I term that in this table as the as-built capacity and what they were intending when they built the school to be, how deep they wanted at each grade level, so 3 first, 3 second, 3 third. And one of the things that I want to point out on this first slide is that capacity is not static, it changes. As a matter of fact, over the time that, from the time your buildings were built to now, you've actually lost over 300 seats of capacity to expanding programs that require larger spaces for smaller number of students. Autistic support, autism classes across the state are greatly increasing. Those students well deserve a full-size classroom,
but you're only going to put 8 students in that classroom. When you convert a general classroom into autistic support, you go from 25 seats to 8 seats. So you can see you've lost actually close to the capacity of a small elementary school in seats just from the expansion of program. That really has, in some cases, impeded how efficiently you can schedule your buildings and where those programs can be located. In terms of the big picture, over the past decade, and there's actually 11 bars on there, I need the first one to show change and the second one for the decade. But you can see that your household and your housing units, as well as the total population of the district, has gone up, while your enrollment has pretty much stayed the same. It's gone up a little, it's gone down a little, but overall, you really haven't seen a great change in enrollment as a whole. I think what's important to understand is that you're seeing different growth in different regions. We took a look at your housing units by township. I can provide you in the final report all the individual tables. This is just the summary. Over the time that we drew the data to do the enrollment projections, you had, according to the U.S. Census, 1,408 additional homes or occupied residential units on the books. That number and the students that drive off of that increase are already baked into the calculations in your projections moving forward. So one of the big initial questions in trying to get the baseline data is, all the enrollment projections, whether it's Decision Insight or Forecast 5 or Crabtree Rohrbaugh Associates or Pennsylvania Department of Education, look at what's happened in the past and predict what's going to happen in the near future. If your growth in residential units is greater, increasingly greater in the near future than it has been in the past, your math is wrong to begin with. So we wanted to establish that baseline of 1,400 units and then take a look at what that meant in terms of future units. Currently, you are averaging 0.08 elementary students per housing unit, 0.4 per middle school, and 9 through 12 was 0.06. So you have 0.18 students per household, K to 12. I wanted to note that that is way below national averages. And obviously, you know the reason. You've got a lot of 50-plus communities. You've got a lot of privately held, even though it's student housing. It's not university held, so it kind of pops in there. So that drives your averages lower. We let them drive it lower because we want to compare apples to apples when we move through this. Talked to all of your township planners. They were all very helpful. Of course, when Randy called, they immediately became even more helpful. But they were all very responsive. When you add up the total number of expected units over the next 5 years, you pretty much equal what happened the past 5 years, with one big exception, and it almost stands out all by itself from all the others, and that's the Tofttrees planned community, Tofttrees West, which has 2,505 planned units in their last phasing plan. And they are looking at, somewhere between a 5 and 10 year build out with shovels in the ground. The most recent we got was 18 months. I heard 12 months, but I think 18 months is probably a little bit more reasonable. That really gives you an increased skew that needs to be added to your enrollment projections of that. That growth, that area, if you're not familiar with it, is in the blue in this map. It makes up a number of parcels that have been combined. It's right against the golf course, and Tofttrees East is just to the, if you're looking at the map, to the right side of those blue areas. And it is wholly in the Park Forest Elementary attendance unit. So barring any changes in attendance boundaries, you can anticipate that once this gets moving, you're going to receive at least 25 students per year in addition to what you're projected to gain just from this development alone at the elementary level. I'd also note, and it was actually a surprise to some people, that their master plan shows a school site, a location for a school. I didn't ask SNA if they had planned to donate that land to the district, but I do believe that for developers, it is often appealing to sales to show the potential site of a new school, even though you don't own that property. They have set aside some acreage there. The little square lot that's in the middle of there is actually a parcel of land owned by your water authority. And I don't know if it's a water tower, a wellhead, a pumping station, but there's something there that the water authority owns that is not owned by the development. And that's where they've indicated they would have a parcel of land. And again, Randy will call them, they'll donate it. Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to point out, just because often the public goes to these numbers because they're often readily available, board members go, and I think you need to understand. You could see the PDE, the past 4 enrollment projections that they provided for the district. And you can see that if you follow them, they are getting less and less and less as time goes on. The reason being is that the Pennsylvania Department of Education has made no adjustment for COVID reductions in enrollment, nor have they made any immediate math calculations for the return. They're simply doing it as they always have. They're looking at what was your enrollment the past 5 years, including any COVID years, and then they're projecting forward. And you'll see when we get to some of these individual attendance areas how that really plays out in comparison to some of the numbers that we're driving out. It's not that their math is flawed. That's just the philosophical stance that they've taken. Just know that it is COVID low, and as I believe we move 3, 4, 5 years post-pandemic, you're going to see their projections come back up, and you'll probably be experiencing a bubble class, a small bubble class, not a large bubble class, moving through over the next 13 years. I'm sorry. So here's where we are. We were really tasked first to start at the elementary level because you have clearly some needs for kids who are already here, not kids that are coming here. We included in these projections the offset for the growth in residential housing beyond what was included. And you can see that it takes PDE's projection that includes the COVID years, and it really starts to level it off. Remember, this is the district as a whole. So this is every elementary school. And what you're going to find when we get into the individual ones, that you have ones that are gaining a lot quicker than the district average, and you have ones that are losing a lot quicker than the district average. But when you put them all together, you're pretty much at a level experience, at least over the next 5 years. We did for each elementary school. I do want to point out to you that we're going, from thousands of students to hundreds of students, less than 200 students in some cases. When you go to that smaller sample size, your margin of error goes up greatly. So when you look at a number and say, this elementary school is going to have 198 students in 5 years, I think you really have to look at it more if they're going to have around 198 students, and overall their trend is up. But saying, we've got a plan for 198 students is really a kind of a misrepresentation. I think you should think of these more as a series of benchmarks. One of the things that will add greatly to some of those final decisions will be the decision insight, which is absolutely wonderful mathematically, all the algorithms that they do. They recently have changed hands and upgraded. And in the process, they're a little slow to respond. They're overwhelmed, I think, like everybody else. But that will help with this benchmarking and really kind of give some more validity to it. organize the schools in their current feeder patterns. I'm not going to show you every map, but I will just stop on this one. What we've done is we've mapped the entire district. That's the Coral Street attendance zone. It's kind of hard to see because the dots are in green and the background is in green. You can see that you have random dots that are outside the attendance area. Those are students that might be in regional special ed programs, or there might be students that have gone through the choice process and do not live in their attendance area but are attending a different elementary school. And that process repeats. I will also tell you that we can click on that geographic area, and if you said to us, what's the population growth in that area, how many non-English speakers are there, what's the average commute time, if the census has the data, we can extract it based on that geographic region, and you can begin to do comparisons if there are things that you want to talk about, in equity and support services or delivery or required spaces. Here's Coral Street. The one thing that is different about our projections, whether it's the individual ones or the elementary projections as a whole, we are looking at your growth rates 5 years before the pandemic. So October of 2019-20 school year, you reported the PDE. That following March then, you had the COVID, we had the COVID pandemic and numbers started to drop. We did not adjust your current enrollment. We simply said in 22-23, everybody who left and decided not to return is done. But we believe that as the economy improves, you're going to move back to pre-pandemic growth rates. So in our projections, we've applied pre-pandemic growth rates to your current 22-23 population. So it's 2014-15 all the way through 2019-20 to get those annual changes. And you can see that, Coral Street is declining in enrollment. The red line in all of these graphs is the capacity of the building. Think of that as the total number of chairs that you have. The blue line, the dark blue line, is the educational capacity. It is impossible to fill every chair, every period, all year long. And as a matter of fact, in an elementary school, the kids will be in their homeroom or their general classroom. They'll go to art. Well, when they're not in art, the capacity of art is 0. When they're not in their homerooms, the capacity is 0. So it's not their homeroom and art like it is in a high school, it's homeroom or art. And also to give you a little bit of flexibility in the future, we're looking about 90%, and that's by best planning practices your target. Filling an elementary school beyond 90% typically begins to erode the experience that the children are having, directly by altering programs or schedules, or indirectly by having them take classes in instructional spaces that, though nicely remodeled, really weren't made to be instructional spaces. The green line then is, going back to that 90%, is actually 10% above your projected enrollment 5 years from now. So you can see in the Coral Street example, you have 375 seats. You're likely in a very efficient schedule to max at 338 seats. But in that building, based on your projections, you're only going to need 197 seats. And again, I will not go through every single one of these. That's why we gave them all to you. But you can see that in Coral Street, prior to the pandemic, the kindergarten growth rate was actually negative 5.65%. When you get the wonky years of COVID and you include those, now it's 3.23%. But that includes all those parents who held those kids back. I could keep them home one more year, I could put them in private kindergarten, and then they come back. So you have those there for comparison. We also took, including all the COVID years, the past decade, what's the total up and down, what's the change in the building. So it's pretty, over 10 years, it's been pretty stable, and it's only changed by minus 0.57, less than 1%. We also have the district averages for all of your elementary schools, and then how each of the elementary schools varies from the district total. And you can see that you've got, in this one in particular, pretty big swing. Yes?
So for the 10 years, though. Sorry, for the 10 years, Coral Street originally did not have the same capacity over that whole 10 years. Like, so originally they were only like 2 deep, right? Roughly, around enough classrooms to have every grade 2 deep, and then when we built the new building, it was capacity of 3 deep. So that number is kind of less valid,
Yes.
correct? Okay,
Yes,
I just want to
a
know that we should think
snapshot.
about that for those
It's-
different buildings that
Yes, it
that
is.
have
It is.
changed over those 10 years.
Yes, it is a snapshot, and you can see that some of them have like, 3.5 deep because you've added to them, and we've done that. But again, it's really trying to give you that sense of where are we as a whole, how does it fit in, and then particularly, how does that attendance unit relate to the rest of them? And I won't go through every one, I'll just point out, certain things from here. Grays Woods, they have been growing. Some of the housing developments are still now in phases 4, 5, and 6. But again, because there were phases 1, 2, 3, that enrollment growth, because of that residential housing growth, is already cooked into your formula for this attendance area. And again, you can see how wonky COVID makes your kindergarten enrollment, which is always critical. You can see in 1920 to 2021, you have the dip, an increase, and then as you go, forward on the projections, it's starting to build back up to where it was. You can see in Grays Woods, the planning number that you need of 419 is just below the educational capacity of 428. It doesn't look like you're going to initially meet that, but I would tell you with the margin of error for this school, you could flip those 2 lines in reality as it plays out over the next couple of years. Anything where you begin to see a close relationship between, less than 2 or 3 classrooms before 90% is really well within the margin of error. And so in that last statement on this page, and every statement has one, in 5 years, the school is anticipated to have the equivalent of 1.88 classrooms before reaching 90% of capacity, that's the educational capacity, or 3.78 classrooms before reaching capacity. That's not necessarily 1.88 open classrooms. That might be every classroom with 4 seats left in it across the board. So make sure you understand that when you look at those, you're not saying, oh, look, this building's got 6. In reality, they may only have 4. This building's got 2, and in reality, they may have -2. So again, we're benchmarking this.
It's very analogous to our charter school issue. Just an observation.
Park Forest dipped and is coming back up, and again, look at where your planned capacity is in relationship to your educational capacity. They're very close in this building as well. Park Forest has the full Trough Trees West, so unlike the others, we actually did a separate one, building in, assuming no attendance line would change, those additional kids coming from that development over the next 5 years. And you can see in this one now, the green line is above. You're above 90% of your planned capacity is above your educational capacity. And I would guess that in 5 years, this might be close, but when that development gets rolling, it's got a lot of single-family homes, a lot of attached single-family homes, and increasingly, we have young people who do not want a yard, and they are very happy to live in a townhouse with a Subaru and 2 kayaks on top of it in the driveway. And when I was teaching, everybody wanted a house and a yard, and that's what young people did. And we're seeing a greater increase in students coming out of that kind of residential housing than we have in the past.
So I'm confused whether this graph does or does not include the Toff Trees East.
It does. It does include the offset for the Toffs. The previous one Does not.
Wait, the previous, which, because I only have
Slide.
one
Oh,
chart
I'm
for
sorry.
Park
Is there-
Forest.
Nope, there are two, Amy, flip the paper.
23 and
Oh, is it after the map? Oh, I apologize. Okay, I didn't go that far. I saw the map and I thought that was the end of the charts. So the first chart does and the second chart does not.
No.
No, the other way around?
The other way around.
Okay, cool beans, sorry, I didn't,
3 is without, and 25, slide 25 is with the Toff Trees West.
got it, thank you. I just trying to label so I make sure.
Obviously, you know, there could be shifts within the district to that attendance boundary.
Away from other.
And, you know, I'm not sure how many of you have been around for some of the conversations, but the area to the, what I'm going to say is northwest of the Toff Trees West area, the Benner Township and Patton Township area, south of whatever that road's called, it used to be going towards, I guess, the Skytop Mountain Road. That is still Park Forest as well. But as a district, we've talked about, could that area become Gray's Woods? And then could that free up some space in Park Forest? So there are some things that we can do there as well. I appreciate, I think that we're taking a very good look at this and factoring in some, not necessarily worst case, but where some of our massive growth could be coming. But we have some things that, some release valves, you know, that we can add there. And, you know, these new areas, everybody that lives in Grays Woods and Graysdale now didn't come to State College and move right there. Many of them came from elsewhere within the district. So there could be some shifting, you know, from different parts of the district too. And obviously, many of you probably already know that. I just wanted to talk through that.
You can see then on the last page, in this section, all the elementary schools feeding Park Forest. Collectively, they have the capacity to manage the projected population. I think later in the discussions, just to put it on your radar, one of the most challenging things will be if you decide to consider any kind of redistricting as part of your strategy, you literally have some separated by geographic distances as well as obstructions, whether they're state game lands or university land, that it's just not simple. It's just not as simple as some districts who could say, let's take 100 kids and move them here and 50 kids and move them over here. You're limited in the geographic relationships. So I don't think I don't think it's easy for you to really move kids within the whole of any of the middle school sending units. You can move some. So then on the Mount Nittany side, we're going through the exact same.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you again.
Sure.
So basically, the takeaway that I'm hearing is that larger scale change will have impacts on our middle school attendance, will potentially alter our middle school, we'll need to alter our middle school attendance zones in terms of the capacity.
Yes, all of these kids eventually are.
So that was our big question. We wanted to know if we had to make big changes in elementary, how much would we also have to change middle school? So.
Right, and again, I think you have to think about that in terms of what you have, what you could do in the short term. I wouldn't break a sweat yet over Park Forest.
Okay.
There are other places that are worth a cold sweat right now, and this is kind of like, okay, we got it on our radar. We know we have to fit it into the whole plan, but we don't have to fit it in the next, 24 months.
Okay, thanks.
I want Easterly Parkway. These are going down. Now let me just get over to so Mount Nittany. Mount Nittany is over its 90% capacity currently, and the current capacity is based on the fact that you took a lot of non-instructional space and converted it into instructional space. So the principal's sharing his office with the psychologist, and there's no conference room, and the kids are on stage for band and certain, you know it all. But that reflects the capacity of how the building is being used today. If you returned the non-instructional spaces to non-instruction, there's even a bigger hole to fill. And that's why you see already a number of classrooms that have been at this building for a couple of years. And I think you're probably going to consider seeing that in the near future. And this is one of those buildings where you're pushing that idea that if you might attend an elementary school that is at or above 90%, you may not be having the same educational experience as someone who's attending a school that's 80% or
Excuse me.
less.
Quick question for you.
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding, and we're all understanding, when you talked about the non-instructional space, you're not talking about just like what used to be, there was a term we used when we were doing the high school about basically that accounts for the fact that you have hallways and bathrooms and all. We're talking about those things that were intended to be instructional in the sense of large group instruction, small breakouts, that we now can't follow that educational model because we've had to make them classrooms. Am I right?
Correct. You've
Okay.
taken your large group rooms, divided them, and created. Now, that's kind of instructional space, but not everyday scheduled space.
Right.
You don't have that flex.
But it was the way that we were wanted to be able to be educating the children, and that's why they were built there, but.
You can see in all of your plans, really purposeful designs. Here's 3 kindergarten classrooms, here's 3 first grade classrooms, here's an extra classroom for Title I or support, here's a small group room, now on to the next cluster. And now when you look, you might have, 2 firsts, 4, kindergarten, no extra classroom, and that's all taken into account with the current capacities. Also, any spaces that you use for preschool or programs from outside the district are also, as they're spread through the district, counted as 0 capacity because you don't have them. Spring Creek is not in the current throes of overcrowding like Mount Nittany, but it is well on its way. What saves Mount Nittany, at least mathematically, is the thought that the enrollment is going to drop. Again, I want to caution you to say this is benchmarking, and given the margin of error, it could be better, it could be worse than it is currently today, very easily within 5 years. Spring Creek has a real sharp, if you look, that's probably the sharpest increase that's occurred, and that really, even COVID didn't distract Spring Creek too terribly much. They've been really overall on the rise since 17, 18, 19. They've been
Do we understand why? Like, was there an actual development or?
I think it was especially the what I'm going to call workforce housing. Yep. You agree with that?
Some more affordable housing?
Yep. Yeah, affordable housing.
Was it newer stuff though, or just they're more occupied?
You mean like over near the mall in College Township? Yeah.
Oh, okay, back there. Okay.
Some
Yeah.
large multi
Townhouse areas. Okay.
Townhouses and yeah.
I just couldn't picture where there had been stuff out there in my head.
Right, there's one behind Sam's Club.
Yep. Okay. Now I know where you're talking about.
I think that the one off of 26, like between the old Giant and the old Sheets.
I'm with you now.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are the 2 things.
It took me a minute to
Yeah.
picture it. Yeah.
And I think never mind, I don't need to go on about the planning agency. Go ahead.
Right.
Sorry.
That's a whole nother can of worms.
Is there something, maybe I'm just reading the graph wrong, but on the Spring Creek graph, how is the planned capacity higher than the actual capacity?
I think
Or are they mislabeled?
The colors are mixed up on that graph, I think.
No.
Then I don't understand.
Okay, so the planned capacity is 10% higher than your projected enrollment. The projected enrollment 5 years from now is 498. So your planned capacity for that building has to be 548, which is, the number came down a little, but it's about 100-ish students, 98 students greater than every seat you have in the building, and it is 103 seats more than the educational capacity. So that building is, while it's not like Mount Nittany now, in a very short time, given some pretty solid projection numbers in the history, is where it's likely heading.
I'm sorry, can you define what planned capacity means again then?
Sure. We want to plan for you to accommodate every student that you're expecting 5 years from now, but we also want to manage a little space for growth and a little space for changing program, and that's why we give you 10% more space than the number of students you're expected to have, and that's what that green line is showing. So the bottom,
Rather than plan specifically to what we believe the projected number to be, that 10% is a common Department of Ed planning guideline.
Yeah, I guess I'm just, because it's a flat green line that goes across the whole span of the period, but obviously everything changes.
Correct.
But you're fixing it at the end point.
Correct.
That's why I
Correct.
was not understanding, because it's
So-
not moving.
Dr. Witham, if I could.
Please.
In Spring Creek, though, I don't believe that there was any significant housing development planned for the future, shared with you by the planning agency. But these projections are built based upon the most recent year's growth. So this is assuming that that growth is going to continue, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So, not sure that that will or will not, I mean, again, these are all estimates. And I think that when you have areas of growth or areas of decline, they're the ones, especially like you said earlier, with our small sample sizes of 8 elementary schools, where we run into some estimation problems at the small level, at the low level. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I'm not trying to discourage that this graph is incorrect. I'm trying to explain what this graph is saying, and that we have to take into consideration that there may be some variance in this graph. But as I'm just going to interrupt and cut to the chase, as Dr. Witham, because Mrs. Yoder and myself have talked with Dr. Witham and the other Crabtree staff about this. We have an immediate problem at Mount Nittany L. You all know this. Again, just putting it on the record for the community. We don't have an immediate problem at Spring Creek, but we need to be aware of one. Easterly, although it looks like there's still some capacity there, those numbers can fluctuate and vary significantly as well because of the type of high number of rental housing units that can be there, and the community that can turn over from year to year, and sometimes even within the year because of the college student population. We believe that focusing on the Mount Nittany, a potential solution at Mount Nittany would potentially alleviate all 3 of those building issues. Not to say that we're looking to do changes in boundaries frequently, but we don't necessarily want to build for every permutation that we could be looking at. Does that make sense to all of you?
Mm-hmm. And I was actually kind of working in that direction because
Sorry, I'm a little
no, that's okay. No,
impatient.
because geographically, with Spring Creek, Mount Nittany, and Easterly, now there are 3 that you can maybe solve some problems by additions at one and lines drawn slightly differently at another, without disrupting the entire district. But even though there's certainly elementary schools that are sending ultimately to Mount Nittany Middle School that you just geographically and physically are not going to be able to slide kids over to in a redistricting. And I think we're going to have to get to that point where you feel comfortable with these numbers and say, this is, as a board and as a community, how comfortable we feel moving this many kids. And this is how comfortable we feel providing additional classrooms. Knowing that you have classrooms on the other side of the district, you just can't get the kids to those seats in any kind of fair and equitable way. There's all of the feeders together. You can see in 5 years, the planned capacity, the green line is just above the capacity. And again, you've got the 2 that are trouble. So here's the whole, the layout that you can see. And when you go down the line, you've got Mount Nittany at 88%, which is, again, currently it's at 96%. the margin of error really could keep it at 96 or 102% in 5 years, but the math currently works out that it's 88%. And Spring Creek is at 111%, and given it's got to get all the way back down to 90%, it could be less of a thing to close in 5 years, but I don't know that you're going to really avoid managing this issue in the very short term, because really this is for kids in majority who are already here and moving through, and both show incoming histories there's no indication that there would be, a change. You've got some that, have a unique little up and down in the average, but in the case of these two, they're pretty dependable as what's been occurring the last 5 years. So I know that's a lot. I mean, that's an awful lot, and that is where our methodology is. We want to get the decision insight and lay it against it. We are looking at the capacities of the middle schools, because ultimately that's where they're going to be. And then the other piece that you have to lay in that's part of the work is, what are the physical conditions of each of these buildings? You're going to have to lay in, if you've got substantial repairs or upgrades required in a middle school, it may or may not be the middle school that's going to need more space potentially. So you're going to have to lay that out over time, because we come to very few districts who all of a sudden they can snap their fingers and do it all. So when we get done, we want to provide you with the tools that you feel comfortable making immediate, short-term and long-term decisions, and then you can evaluate and reprioritize as things go on, and prepare yourself to manage the potentially worst-case scenario or potentially best-case scenario.
Yeah. Dan?
I just have one small typo in a matter
sure.
of speaking. There are two maps for two elementary schools, but they're the same map. So,
it's probably cutting and pasting photographs.
Yeah, the map for Ferguson Township Elementary School seems to reflect the attendance at Ferguson Township. But
I apologize.
That's superimposed on Mount Nittany. So, just to let you know, that Mount Nittany is something else. It just isn't that map.
These maps are interactive, and at some point, we certainly can turn you loose on a website, and you can do some exploration of them.
How many people smile over that? That's impressive.
Penn State has a GIS program, so probably several of us know someone in GIS. Oh, I didn't know that.
Their open source was quite a find. I mean, we were able to come up with a lot of data on the district.
Awesome.
More than we needed, but it's always fun to see where the sewer lines end. Sorry, you know where the sewer lines end is where your next school has to be.
It's just funny because sewer lines came up just recently at a meeting. So.
This is true.
Where are they going to extend them?
Danielle, did you want to add anything about any of our other programs or?
We didn't speak about the other programming in all of the schools tonight, of course. We were really just trying to show you intended capacity, something that we're going to have to consider when we move forward, and we have been informing Crabtree is the additional services at some of our schools, the need to possibly relocate them if we need to go back to the intended use for those buildings. So 3 main schools, Radio Park, Mount Nittany, and Easterly Parkway, all have multiple classrooms being used for specialized programming. And then this year, of course, the addition of Hearts to Coral Street removed 3 classrooms from that building.
So, I mean, that's part of why there is some adjustments to your capacity numbers. And going back even for our last 3 buildings, we did not have the 5th special at the time that those buildings were planned. And so we have that 5th special. Not all of our buildings have a separate instrumental room separate from the music room. So if we go to look at some some addition or additions. We would be building in some baselines from our last 3 building projects, and then also looking at new baselines moving forward for different spaces. And that's what the administration would recommend as a starting point, and then obviously you can have those conversations, and obviously we'll get community input as well.
You mentioned autistic support and other programs. It's come up before, so I'm just going to assume, but ask you to nod your head that the ELL issue is part of that equation as well.
Yeah, in fact, we moved forward to keeping them at Hubs one more year, but it's something we have to reconsider. Something else, I'll say it tonight, is 3 of the 4 feeder schools going into the Mount Nittany are significantly higher SES schools than the other buildings. So it's 3 of our, when we talk about equity and needs and different things, what's that going to take? They are 3 of the 4 funnel into Mount Nittany.
So is that something that Crabtree would be able to, like, I know it's sacrilege to bring up, whatever. It's dangerous and nerve-wracking to talk about massive change, but if we wanted to talk about equity at the middle levels, is that something that you would be able to provide us a breakdown of another way to feed those 2 schools if we were to try to address that issue?
We can. I will tell you that I'm doing Central Bucks right now. They are highly populated and their schools are close. And I can draw a quick line and gather up 150 kids of all demographics. It's not that easy
here. No, it's good. Like, I partly asked the question so you would say that, because we have conversations with some groups in the community that care a lot about demographic equity, and I certainly do in general, but it's pretty complicated here, and so that's something we need to be talking about in front of our community to help them understand.
And when we move from where you are to where you want to be, you might be looking at saying, okay, we've got that, but we've got to take 2 more classrooms offline to provide support services. So now, do we need a bigger addition over here? Do we need to move more kids over here? And how do you find that balance based on creating that greater equity? If you get to the point, and I wouldn't get anybody alarmed about redistricting until that yields itself as a potential strategy that you want to consider, but state a list of goals. We don't want students to have a bus ride more than the average, and we don't want to create a Title I school where one didn't exist, and we want to ultimately get as close to the population demographics as the high school and any school as possible. And you're never going to get the perfect mix off of all of the buildings, but if you can get all of the buildings to have the same functionality for the curriculum and the ability to meet the unique needs of the students in that elementary school, whether it's an extra Title I room,
Right.
whatever, now you can talk about equity without necessarily having to push everybody all over the place and disrupt everybody's lives.
And it's probably been, I don't know, a year or more ago that we started this conversation and started some of the discussions that of those important. We felt that it was appropriate to have this baseline conversation. We want to continue working down some of the other information that requests that Dr. Witham talked about, and then we'll be coming back probably in committee to building some of those important decisions and those characteristics that are important to you as a board. And I would expect, given how this board has typically worked, that there'll be an opportunity for community input as well.
Yeah, and we had started some of that process
You have.
at the last iteration to some degree. We had started having some
Absolutely.
conversations about that.
Okay.
Just a quick question. What capacity do you recommend a building to be at when building a new building? Do you have that information by any chance?
I'm sorry.
At what capacity of students? 80%, 90% capacity, planned capacity?
At the elementary level, we're shooting for 90% utilization. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, correct.
But at the secondary, it'll drop to 85 because the programs are more complex and scheduling is more complex.
Yes, and in faster growing districts, we have elementary schools, they're like, we want to build in 85, we're going to go to 85% because we want to build in an extra 5% for the aggressive growth that we're experiencing. And your schools in the borough, they're probably not going to see a lot of kids move in anymore. You could drive those up to 90, 92% of capacity, and it probably wouldn't be, it wouldn't be a changed experience for anybody.
As long as the needs in those buildings didn't change.
Well, and that's.
Gotta fix that
that's the piece
variable.
that you
Sure.
have to kind of balance with all of that.
Go ahead.
Well, it's both the needs changing and also potentially programmatic changing, because we know around the state, things like pre-K are getting more and more important. And space, I mean, this district was able, I think without huge, pulling out of hair, to go from half-day to full-day kindergarten, because we were at a point when some things had been done so that there was capacity. So that's one of those things that keeps me up late at night.
Oh, and that's another thing, the 2 pre-Ks are, we're looking to
Right.
move those out of Fairmont for next school year, and that'll be
Yeah.
taking additional capacity out of our elementary schools.
For sure.
Okay. So we'll hope to have these gentlemen back with us in another month or so. And if you have any other comments or questions, feel free to direct them to our attention so that we can factor that into our next presentations. Okay?
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you have any questions as you go through the data, just reach out and we'll get you the answers quickly.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, this is really helpful. I have a much better understanding compared to some of our earlier discussions trying to tackle this issue, so I just wanted to recognize that that was really helpful.
Thank you for all you do. As a retired superintendent, I have been traveling all over the state in all kinds of board meetings the past 2 years, and this board meeting returns my hope and faith. I'm sure you have your moments, but to hear these young people talk and to hear you talk about leadership and setting examples and equity, and it's just a pleasure to work here.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very
No,
much.
I don't want to enter the search.
Okay.
Tom Templeton got me my last job, and that was my 35th year. And thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
I'm good to go.
All right, thank you so much. We're on to policy, so I'd like to call Ms. Pierce to the table to provide an update on several policy recommendations.
So, as you know, there are 5 policies we'd like to review today. Policy 320 and 321 are very similar. No, let me back up, I almost forgot. I know the Policy Development Committee knows this. I think the entire board does, but I'm not sure. Right now, we have 3 employee group policies, 300, 400, 500. We're going to mush them all together and make them all 300. We'll be talking about that at Policy Development in March. So these policies, 320 and 321, are intended to apply to all employees. These are updates based on input from PSBA. In fact, the 320 is PSBA. It more directly talks about employee conduct, of course, just like the title says, employee conduct in non-school settings. So certainly employees have freedom of speech, no doubt about that. But if they're identifying themselves as an employee of the school district, pretending they speak for the school district, that's a problem. Unless it's one of you. But you're not employees.
Stopped paying 8 months ago. Are there any questions or comments on 320? This is the second time we've seen this one at the table, right?
No, this is
the first.
Well, you saw it at PDC, but
Okay,
this
thank
is the first time here.
Okay.
And then 321, is similar revisions. PSBA suggested renaming it Political Activities and Campaigning, which I agree is a good idea, especially given what's in front of us in the next 2 years. And just tries to clarify what our expectations are.
The term campaigning could be like an election coming up.
Mhm.
But it can also be things like, you know, if someone advocates for I mean, there are different types of campaigning. And is
Mhm.
this meant to be particularly election-related campaigning? Or could it be, you know, someone's campaigning for, you know, the school colors to change or something like
Or
that?
somebody's campaigning for solar power.
I wasn't going to go there. But I think it is an important thing because they're somewhat different. And I'm just trying to get a sense of whether this is aimed at
It
both of
doesn't-
those or
It is general. It does not say.
so it could include the school colors or the solar power. Okay.
Because it's all about disrupting the school.
And like we've said before about when we discussed advertising, it's a captive audience.
Yep.
So that changes. You know.
Yes, it does.
I just want to clarify one thing. Under the following situations are exempt from the provisions of this policy. Number 1 says discussion and study of politics and political issues when applicable to the curriculum, such as history, current events, and political science. Like, would that mean that if a student in a math class asked a question about the election, they couldn't talk about the election at all because it's not applicable to the math curriculum in that class? Yeah. So I'm seeing a yes from him, and I saw a couple of head shakes no from other people.
I thought you were
so-
going somewhere else
Oh,
with that
okay.
question.
But what if they were asking about like how to crunch the polling data?
Right, so like if
Like,
they're
that
in a
would be
math class and
applicable.
it's about
Well,
we're doing some PS thing.
Standard based. I mean, if it's in their standards,
Right.
they could do it.
In the curriculum, because even the one that says, that talks about history, it says in the curriculum. So if you're supposed to be talking about World War I, hard to talk about a current campaign.
I would prefer to just.
Although our poli-sci curriculum is changing and more theme-based. So.
Well, then it might be.
Then it might be.
That's why to me, the such as history, current events, and political science.
And appropriate classroom studies.
Yeah.
So such a-
I think without those words, it's actually a little more clear. Without the examples of those particular topics.
I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
okay.
I see what you're saying, but I think the appropriate to like anything appropriate to classroom studies is general enough that it's fine.
All right, next. Next, we have 709. Building security. Again, these are PSBA suggested updates, which is most of the policy. The current 709 is very brief.
And also, just for your information, 711, the camera surveillance is on our agenda for tomorrow. So if you were interested in that one at all.
Yes, on the Policy Development Committee.
I shouldn't say the PDC agenda tomorrow. Go ahead.
this is one of those challenging things where we want policies and we want regulations, and sometimes there can be regulations that have such an impact on culture and things like that that it becomes more, could potentially be a governance issue. And that's what I'm thinking about here, in particular things like sign in and sign out. On one level, of course, that shouldn't be something that we're talking about here at the board, but there can also be bigger things, like if there are big purchases involved with that and all. So I'm just wondering about in there. And
Well, purchases would be brought to the board.
yeah.
Are we, never mind, I'm sorry.
One thing that occurs to me is that it's well after 10. And our experience before has been when we hit 10, our productivity takes a dive. So I'm wondering, in addition to this review, if Linda, if you would be open to our giving feedback, should we review these again to you, or to be, maybe to, I don't know if you should be passed on to the policy committee, but.
They've been
policy
through
development.
policy.
Yeah.
We brought them here because they're done in policy, and we're trying to get them approved.
Okay.
So it's not it's our first look,
It's our
right?
first look.
Okay, so
We have two looks, right? This one and then
Right.
the second one during approval.
Are you asking if we can forego this discussion and
Oh,
you
no.
all can send me comments?
Well, in addition, perhaps, it's supplemental. In other
Oh,
words, if
sure.
we don't have our heads together enough to
Yep.
do it this evening, we could perhaps pass on comments.
Just
that
make
might occur
sure
to us
you
later
send it to
when we
everybody.
recover.
And these these last ones were largely driven by Act 44 and all the security stuff. I mean, the policy committee had very little editing to do on these last couple ones in the list.
Including the next two to come.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. This last chunk were all pretty much generated by PSBA and the act, and we kind of said, yep, they were pretty good to go. But of course, we welcome the full board's input.
And it
But
sounds
just as
like-
background, they were kind of.
And we all weren't there. Some of us, I was there.
Yeah.
But I think that it would be helpful for those who weren't there to be able to have, after this late hour, they may prefer to also be in touch with Linda about any comments, or actually to
The board
Tammy
and,
as well.
the board and Linda.
As the
board and Linda, there you
the
go.
board and
Yeah.
about this.
So I think that's totally acceptable, Dan.
Okay, thank you.
So any more thoughts for here on 709?
Let's go.
And we have 805.1, which is relations with law enforcement agencies. Again, a policy we're required to have by Act 44. Again, written by PSBA. And then you'll see the same with 805.2. It's a required policy, and it was written by PSBA.
They look good to me.
I have no comments.
Okay?
All right.
So unless there's an email that comes across that we need to review together, we'll have these for action in a couple of meetings.
That sounds good. Yeah. So, definitely board members feel free to take another look at them and let the board and Linda know if you have any concerns.
Thank you.
About anything.
Okay, thank you.
Cool.
Just for fun.
Juice at the meetings.
Everyone take a deep breath. Just need to stall for just 1 second. We're stalling.
Can the
budget can wait.
Okay.
And Mike will be really fast on these
Okay.
two. The board reports,
We can
we can wait on those two.
Okay, sounds good. All right, since it has gotten into late hours, we are going to hold on 7D for another meeting. And we're just going to finish up with 7E and F for tonight.
I'll be fast.
Mike has already promised to be fast. So 7E, Mr. Fisher will provide a status of the physical plant building project.
Yeah, so this memo just kind of laid out when we're going to ask for permission to bid this project, when, our design will be complete, and the timeline then to have a bidder on board and kind of start putting shovels in the ground. Did outline, I've been communicating all along, we were going to put 3 alternates in place, one for the vehicle charging station, the solar voltaic system on the roof, and then also those public restrooms. So we've kind of outlined what we anticipated cost would be for those. If you'd like to give guidance on if one of those are definitely in or definitely out at this point, that's great, not needed. We can add them to the alternates, as like I said, in the bid process. And then we also, down below, put together, right now, at our kind of 90% construction drawings are, the estimated costs of the building, both construction costs and soft costs. So coming out at about 5.2 million, which is kind of where we thought we'd kind of end up. Anybody like me to go through there individually? Okay.
Thank you, as always, for your lovely chart.
And thanks for the 3 alternates.
Yeah.
That leads it up to the bidding process, see how it shakes out.
Sure.
Thank you.
I mean, you probably already checked, Mike, but the one thing I don't know, we had gotten some grant money from the state to do the solar panels on the elementary buildings. I think they were DCED grants. I don't, no, they weren't DCED. They were.
That was the ACE
were
program
they?
through
Okay,
DCED.
they were. I don't know that those are necessarily still available, but I didn't know with the new infrastructure bill if there would be anything coming
We
out
are
that
still
will
looking
give-
into that, and that program, we don't own the SRECs for that. So that was a trade-off.
Okay,
So that's something to keep in mind as well.
okay.
Yeah, and when I looked at the ACE program, the requirement that they had was the third-party verification,
Oh, okay.
right? So they may be renewing the program and apply different standards to it, but that was one of the things when I looked at it in 2022.
Okay.
So.
I mean, I figured
But
you
there
were
are
looking
other
at
thing-
grants
there are
and other
definitely
things.
Sure,
I just wanted to say that out loud for everybody's benefit, that we would look for that stuff.
Absolutely.
Awesome, thanks.
All right. Then without further ado, we'll move on to an update on the North Building project.
So we, as reported on last board meeting, we said that we were going to have this design, our lead charrette on the 14th. So I have provided the results here from that effort, along with kind of an anticipated design timeline. So we're actually looking at this project from a design standpoint and bidding standpoint, actually catching up to the physical plant project and being very, very close so that they can run in parallel. Our hope is that, we might get some economies of scale if we have a contractor that's interested in both projects. They're fairly similar, other than the site work, so that's certainly possible. So going down here, we've outlined kind of our owner's project's requirements. We're talking about energy efficiency. We're talking about getting good daylighting in, good indoor air quality, and also kind of maximizing our reuse and recycling to see if there's some of the, because the space is kind of built out for a shop. We'll sort of see if we can't reuse some of the fixtures that are in there in the next design. While also reducing waste, right? So if we look at their scorecard, what we ended up with through this charrette was 73 points maximum that we feel as though we could actually get to. And then with a 15% attrition, we're at 62, which meets our gold standard at that the building is currently certified at. So we feel pretty confident about that. I'll go down through some of these descriptions. If we kind of at a high level, if you have questions, feel free to interject. Our location and transportation, our surrounding density and diverse uses gets at some points, or access to transit, to the CATA stops, bike facilities, we'll have bike racks there, and then, reduced parking footprint. We actually put in, less parking than required by that borough permit, so. Sustainable sites, there's a few points available here. Rainwater management, one more thing we're looking at, there is a greenhouse that the Delta, we've done some work in there that hopefully the Delta's gonna start using again. So we thought maybe we could do some rainwater harvesting, and then they can maybe use that water in the greenhouse. So that's kind of being looked into. Our adjacency to, open spaces. Water efficiency, we get points for not having a cooling tower, we get points for not doing any kind of outside irrigation. Water metering, same thing, we'll be installing a water meter on, so that we can kind of, monitor how much water use we have, right? Getting into energy and atmosphere, commissioning, so we voted on a commissioning team this evening. So just as a point, if somebody who's not familiar with the commissioning process, so we actually engaged them during design of the physical plant building. So, and they came back with their first kind of round of design review and had some really good comments. So that all goes back through me and then back into the engineering team. So like I said, they're engaged. They really add value up front, so that we find stuff at the design phase so it doesn't cost us money down the road and we have to change it, right? Some points there for energy performance. Like I said, we talked about, we're going to try to get as energy as efficient as we can. There has not been a system chosen yet, whether that's a variable refrigerant flow or it's a variable air volume system, kind of in the preliminary design phase at this point. Once again, advanced metering. We already have good metering on the building, so we kind of know what our load is throughout the whole building at any given time. So that's already in there. And kind of moving down through materials, resources, this is really about kind of, recycling, making sure that, our equipment and our supplies and materials are processed in some sort of sustainable way. So, we do have there's some wording in here about that, about some of, some of the products we're looking at using. The vendors and the manufacturers have, commitments to sustainability. And then indoor air quality, we've kind of talked about that. It's really about enhanced indoor air quality strategy. So it's really like, if you're monitoring CO2, so you have real-time feedback on what your air quality is doing, and then your equipment can react to that. And then, some indoor air quality testing as well once the building is up or renovated, where we can actually validate those results. Thermal comforting. And then, interior lighting, so lighting controls, right? And then kind of our regional priority, right? We have, so that's the restrooms at Community Field and the charging station actually affect our point score down here at the CTC. So, so we get points for having that kind of that are close by, in a close proximity, so. That was quick and dirty. Are there any?
I loved it.
You're welcome. Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I think just two things, and this would be connected with the other as well. I think it would be great if in the innovation credit, there might also be the possibility of using the building for teaching purposes itself with CTC students and with other students, whatever the systems are. Turning the building into a teaching tool I think is really good, and creating those plans is, certainly possible, especially with some of our more engaged CTC faculty. So I think there's a possibility there for another point, right? But the point wouldn't be for the point. The point would be to just have in the design process itself and going forward for this facility and the other, for students to be able to use it as a learning tool about sustainability, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. I should note that we already have engaged with the C2C teachers, especially the architectural teachers for the physical plant building, and already passed along the drawings to them for them to actually use as a visual aid in the classroom. And then we'll be bringing on the construction trades group and the ag group for the landscaping, and then we actually get, underway.
So that would actually
It's in the works.
actually that's like doing the work already. So I'm really happy to know about that. Thank you.
So if you we want to take time to absorb maybe more of this at some point, yeah? And it's not 11:15, and if you have any questions, feel free to send me a note, and it's no problem.
Thanks
Happy
so much,
to answer.
Mike.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for your thoroughness, Mike, and your willingness to provide information that you think is relevant to us. Thank you.
All right, we have board reports. Is there anyone with a pressing board report to share this evening that can't wait for another meeting?
Mine is really not really going to come about until Thursday anyway. So
Yes, so.
I can help do the planned agenda, but that won't really help. It's predicting the future. I'm not sure I can do that.
All right. All right, we'll just go on to
The
future.
only thing I'd like to say is, so Carlene asked me to give the CTC report, so I won't do that, but I'd just like to say that February is National Career and Technical Education Month. So if I said that next month, then, it
You
wouldn't be.
lost.
So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much. All right, looking ahead to future meetings, on February 21st, which is tomorrow, we have a Policy Development Committee at 1:30 here. On March 13th, 2023, we'll have a Committee of the Whole / regular board meeting at 7 p.m. That will include information reports from Culture, Climate and Learning, Facilities and Grounds, and Finance and Audit, along with action items including permission to bid physical plant building, approved bus purchasing bids, and MF turf replacement and cleaner equipment. On March 20th, March 20th, 2023, we'll have a regular board meeting at 7 p.m. With action items to include a generator addition, a fire suppression system replacement, a hot water pump replacement, North CTC permission to bid, as well as information and discussion. And then finally, March 24th, we will have another Policy Development Committee. Please note that this meeting was moved from its standard Tuesday timeframe to a Friday. And all meetings will be held here in the boardroom. Okay, I would now like to call for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second. Third.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. The meeting is adjourned.